So, let's see. Is this all working? Is this all working? We are streaming live. We are live on YouTube and on Twitch. I've got the notes from both. Twitch has usually came in first. Twitch always comes in first. I should probably log in for Twitch. That would actually make it work slightly better, shouldn't it? I should. Well, today we're doing Dalrymple-Hamilton, who is the original Speed Demon. And when I say the original Speed Demon, today I was recording his the recorded video, which will come out next Saturday about him. And I was trying very hard to not use the phrase, and then he crashed another destroyer. Because he was going too fast. I kept trying to avoid that phrasing. It was so tempting to use that phrasing, but I didn't. I was good. I was nice. I was kind. I didn't use that phrasing. As tempting as it was, as honest to goodness tempting it was. Yeah, we'll see. Sound isn't quite 5x5. I have no idea why. No idea at all why. So, the life of Admiral Sir Frederick Hugh George Dalrymple-Hamilton when speed is never enough. Clarkians. Starting to provide in battleships of barbecue. Clarkians. That sounds worrying. That sounds very worrying. That sounds almost like Whovians. How are you all doing? How is everyone? I thought this was the appropriate t-shirt for this evening. Warning, may spontaneously start talking about battleships. My family gets me the best t-shirts. They really know me. So, Hammond, no. Because you see, Dalrymple-Hamilton walks away from his crashes without any damage. The ship gets damaged. He doesn't. The ship gets damaged. He doesn't. And it's sort of a case of, I realized today that when I did this video, that those of you who do follow mine and Drax analysis, that Rodney was certainly occasionally a little bit faster than she was supposed to be. When you study the captain, when you study his track record, well, let's say this. It becomes very clear that he is definitely a bit of a speed demon. He is. You want a biscuit, don't you? I know you too well, but you do look gorgeous. So they can all firstly say how well your bouffon, your coiffures be done. Yes. In the video that comes out tomorrow, you'll realise I start off the video with no Raleigh, and then Raleigh comes home, and Raleigh suddenly appears in the video. Because you were off getting your hair done, weren't you? Yes, you were. Yes. He was off getting made to look even more poodly. Good boy. There you go. You can have one, but only one. We're cutting you down. Hello, everyone. Hello. How are we all doing? How goes your Thursday evening? Apologies for being a bit late, but the shopping was late, and some of the stuff that was late included bulbs, which you might notice has made it in here look a bit like... You are not getting another biscuit by basically mugging me. You're not. Down. Behave. You behave beautifully all day. Do not start mugging me for the cameras. Doesn't work. They might think you're cute. I don't. Very good. Poodles. So, Dalrymple-Hamilton. Now, I have a couple of pictures of him. They're both from his later in his life. One of the things that seems to be a common theme is finding it very difficult to find pictures of him and the ships he commanded. Thank goodness this doesn't apply to HMS Rodney, but there are a few. Yes, he did get the inside of his hair trimmed. I'm talking about the pool, by the way. That Paul just asked a question. There are a few pictures of Rodney, but he seems to not be the type who takes photos a lot. Now, here is one of the interesting things, because we're going to be talking about this. This is the first time I've done a profile so far, which has been out about a figure who's in the modern era, yet he's not one of the more prominent figures. You see, as much as we might love Dalrymple-Hamilton, as much as anyone who I believe actually looks him up would love him, anyone who looks up the story of HMS Rodney and the Bismarck, or the battle with Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, any of that scenario, looks up Dalrymple-Hamilton, you will love him. Because he's just one of those characters. He's kind of like Vian. You don't know how he gets out of his crew, but he does. But saying that, unlike Vian, there is no autobiography. There is no autobiography. I know you're gorgeous, but I'm not budging. No, I'm not. You might think you're still growing, but you're not. You might think you're a puppy, but you're still not. You're still a puppy, but you're not. You're very gorgeous, yes. He is very transactional. You see, the thing is, Josh H. Oh, hey, a destroyer captain. No. See, the thing is, he's not just a destroyer captain. He is special because his family he comes from is very, very connected. If I explained that his son, North, the godfather of his son, down and behave, the godfather of his son is Edward VIII. The godmother of his daughter is Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. So, his family is very, very connected with a lot of events that were going on in the 1920s and 30s, and even prior to that. They have been around royalty for a long time. They have been servants in the Navy and the Army for a long time. This is one of those families in the UK. And as such, they really do eschew the limelight. They don't publish autobiographies. They rarely get biographies. And the best books you can find to talk about him are things like Bismarck and Rodney and a few other books by Ian Ballantyne. There's some stuff by Ludovic Kennedy, who did know him, in his hunt for the Bismarck. There is some stuff from some other contemporary sources you can find. But as I'll be showing as you get in, the actual records become very interesting. And that leads us to our first mystery. We're not actually sure where he was born. You see, according to naval records, and his service record, he was born in London. Hello, I do like your toy. You've been asleep all day, apart from walkies, and now you're doing this because we're live. No. You're very cute. Why do you do this the moment you get live? He is... As I said, we're not sure. He could be born... His family lived in Bargany, Ayrshire. They had a house in London. So he could have been born in Scotland. There are various sources which claim he was born in Scotland. He was certainly raised in Scotland for most of the time, but he did go down to London quite often because his family had houses in both places. But his naval record and all his records say he was born in London. But this is the fun you get with him. Because you can go to... He has multiple sources, and you expect this when dealing with someone who's born in the 18th century, to an extent. You expect it, especially as you go back to 17th, 16th, 15th century. But he was born in the very late 19th century, in 1890. And we are not sure where he is born. We are not sure where he is born. So, that's always a fun thing to think about. I would say the best online sources if you're hunting for information at the moment. You've got the Dreadnought Project and you've got U-Boat.net. All have fairly good, fairly sensible sources and information about him. The U-Boat.net is the better for a day-by-day of wartime service. Dreadnought Project is better for an over-life chart of service. But we're getting into all that. Now the thing is, normally, when I get this level of problem, and I'm not having you ripping your toy up behind me, just because I'm not paying attention. And I know you're a bit more cooped up than you normally are, but your brother's recovering from an operation, so you sit down, okay? Sit down and behave, okay? Good boy. Now, Frank, Bummer. Oh, yes. Oh, 7 years before my grandfather, like yesterday. Yes, but 1890 is not exactly a period where I don't expect someone, especially as important from this family, for us not to know where he's born. To give you another scenario, it'd be like if we didn't know where the Queen Mother was born. We're talking that sort of seniority of family. Now, again, this is the point that usually I would go, right, so we go to National Archive sources. Well, I'll be talking through those in a bit, and why they're not really the great material. And so, honestly, you put together a lot of his history, a lot of his leadership style from what he accomplishes. It's almost like, well, I talk about forensic engineering, you're talking about forensic command. You're looking into his abilities, you're looking into what challenges he was given and how he accomplished them. And he was given challenges. Now, he learnt his trade between 1905 and 1917. That's when he gets his first command in 1917. So he joins the Navy at 15 years old, roughly 14, 15. He has achieved command by the point he's about 27. He will serve under some of the greats of the Royal Navy and will be one of the greats of the Royal Navy. But it's worthwhile considering that his actual command period, his actual commands, and, you know, the thing I do love especially is reading through his, which one shall I go with? Well, 243, we'll talk about them in a second. I'll make sure I have 243 up on display next to me, in big form and zoomed in. His earlier commands, well, his early training commands, basically read like a fast track to destroyers. That's what he wants to be in. That's what he loves. He wants the small ships, the aggressive ships. He basically proceeds down. He starts off with Britannia and Hindustan, which is, of course, where you train. And then from that point onwards, he is pushing for small ships. He is pushing for the smaller vessels. He does do some time in some of the smaller cruisers. He really does. But he pushes for the smaller vessels. And the lines that come out about him are, and I have to say, really, really fun to read. Because, you see, whenever you serve your command and you serve in your time of service in the Navy, what happens is they write a one-line note about you about next to your career time. And if we look at these are what I'm talking about. Now, they're fun to read, but I will point out that to read them, I have them scaled up to roughly 200% on my screen. You can go and download these digitally for free from the UK National Archives. You can go and look at them. And they're fun to read. They really are. But please note, the Dreadnought Project, who are staffed by some, I would say, of the experts in actually figuring out this writing, in figuring out how to do this, in figuring out what to do. They write that it is hard to read. that it is difficult to read. They write that it's hard to read. They do. And I would say it's very, very hard to read. This is why I take my hats off to those people when they do those things. They have a really hard time, and they read all this, and they read through these documents, and they produce the notes they do. Which is also why there's such lovely things about, oh, we're not sure about reading this, you know, we can't tell, tell what this says on medical notes. I did almost send through today the section which they've downloaded some medical stuff and gone, Dr. Dan, can you figure out what this medical stuff says? And I went, actually, the handwriting is bad enough that it even makes most of Dr. Dan's colleagues look good. Download, scan, and pray. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And so, you know, we know roughly his career, but it is particularly badly written. I will say that. It is particularly badly written. But still, you get some time, and if you want to, and this is what I usually do in the past, if I can download them and I can't read them on the scan, I go and get them in person, and I... Don't say I do this too. No, I don't. Make sure I not do it too closely. I literally put an imaginary pen in my hand over it, and I imagine what I'd be writing to get the shapes. And that's how I try and work it out. And that's what I did with this today on the screen. I was literally sitting here in front of the screen, imaginary handwriting what the symbols would be, and see if it could work it back into my mind. That way. And you do have to do that sometimes. It's a forensic approach to documents. It's fun. But what you realise very quickly is he's pushing towards the destroyers. He is undoubtedly very aggressive and very, very focused. And so it's vessels like these which he's pushing for. Now, there are advantages to this, okay? Destroyers offer a junior officer 3 main advantages. 3 main advantages. It's Dalrymple-Hamilton, Thomas Gauchois. First advantage. As a junior officer, you can get a lot of experience quickly. You can jump around various different positions, and you can be in charge, and you can learn a lot very, very quickly. And this helps. This gives you experience. This gives you knowledge. This gives you a chance to learn. Secondly, a destroyer has only a few officers aboard, so it can give a officer who's pushing hard the chance for a lot of experience of seniority, of command, very quickly. A midshipman can end up standing watch. That's never going to happen on a cruiser or a battleship. A junior officer can build up a lot of experience very quickly in terms of not just in terms of the breadth of a ship and understanding its engineering, its gunnery, all the operations and navigation. It can also, and if Powder Monkey is really annoying people, I will pause it and I will just turn it off. It should be off. If it's not working. We're doing some testing today. But the thing is, you also get not just the breadth of command experience, but you also get the depth of actually being in charge of things, being in charge of operations, being able to do things. And that's useful. That is really useful. That is critical, some would say. And the third thing, well, destroyers are dangerous. And as has ever been the way, if you want to get promoted, quickly, you need the people above you to start disappearing. And that's either by their own promotion, either in the ranks, or to maybe a higher plane of existence. You need them out the way. In destroyers, there's plenty of opportunity for both. There's plenty of opportunity for both. Josh H. There's an archive near me that's attempting to use AI learning models to read old stuff. Not going great from what I know. Yeah, I would say from personal experience of dealing with some AI projects involved in this, the trouble is it's not just the handwriting which is different, it's the English which is different. And you almost need to train the AI model on Old English first, and they're just sort of getting around this. But the trouble is, English changes more than people like to admit. People like to believe that English is special, and it doesn't change. It does. It does change a lot. It's fun. I've dealt often with the concept of the past as a foreign country. Well, it definitely is it is a foreign country in terms of linguistics. It definitely is a foreign country in terms of linguistics. And yeah, that's the life you have to deal with on it. That is the life you have to deal with. A protected leader should have practiced speaking up. Yeah, they do. And the thing is also, the thing you have with destroyer crews is because they are quite so small, they tend to have a far more cooperative team. If you're considering HMS Gary, which is one of the destroyers he commands, and it's a cool little Yarrow type river class destroyer. It has a crew of 70. Think of that in World War I era. 70 crew. My year group at school, when I was going through my GCSEs, was roughly 70. Roughly 70 in my year group. The entire A-level 6th form, that's the 17s and 18-year-olds at my school, was roughly 70. I knew them all not only by face, but by name. I knew their family. And I wasn't with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a tight ship. Imagine how intimate that gets. You're on a 600-ton stand displacement, 671-ton full load destroyer. It's 70 meters long overall. It's got a 7-meter wide beam. In that, it packs 4 Yarrow boilers, 2 vertical triple expansion engines, would produce 7,000 shaft horsepower, and 130 tons of coal. Can do 25.5 knots at top speed, officially. Officially. You know exactly who you're talking with. Josh, I'm going to hazard a guess that destroyers often hot bunked too. They were especially small in World War I. Yes and no. You had hammocks for the crew on a destroyer, which meant you'd have your own hammock, but there might not be enough hooks and spaces for you. So there might instead of you hot bunking so much as sharing beds, you'd be putting up your hooks where you could, your hammocks where you could. Because whilst theoretically there's enough for you, if they're carrying any extra supplies, any extra stores, there won't be enough. English is special. It's not static, but it is a language that drags other languages into dark alleys and mugs them for vocabulary. So there's at least 2 other languages I know of. Japanese also does that occasionally. So, sorry, I have 2 managers who mumble. Oosh, that's bad. That's bad. Going for a nappy means 2 very different things depending on what side of the pond as well. Yeah. Oh, there are many reasons to avoid hammocking in the engine room. Many reasons. Right then. With that being said, let's consider the World War I command. Now, here is the quality of the commander you're dealing with. He has officially 8 commands of 6 destroyers between January 1917 and May 1918. Six different destroyers. 8 commands of them. Now, the thing is, what happens in some of these ships' cases is really quite cute. And it's best typified by going to the Dreadnought project. Okay? Because he's captain of HMS Gary from the 2nd of January 1917 to the 26th of January 1917. When she needs to go for some maintenance and repair. And so he gets literally straight on the 29th of January into the command of HMS Fawn, who he's in charge of till the 14th of February. When on the 19th, and then on the 19th of February, 19th of February 1917, he then transfers over to HMS Lark. He's with her till the 25th of February 1917. Well, 28th. And then the 3rd of March 1917, he's back aboard HMS Gary. He was his own predecessor. Can we all think what might have happened to Gary in that time? Can we all imagine what happened to it? You're very beautiful, but you're also supposed to be on a diet, watching your weight, and not even eating everything in sight. And not milking them for everything you can get. If you keep being naughty, you know what happens. I send you off to your bedroom early. You don't like that, so don't be naughty. Now, he done has Gary for a while, and then he gets HMS Druid. Now, HMS Druid, he commands from the 22nd of June 1917 to the 1st of March 1918. That's great, you think. In that time, he managed to bash her into a trawler. It takes skill. Then he gets command of the Murray, which he commands from the 1st of March 1918 to the 19th of April 1918. Then he switches on the 19th of April 1918 to the 3rd of May to command of HMS Monster. Then he gets back the Murray, the 3rd of May, and he commands her to the 3rd of February 1919. So yes, actually I said May 1918, I should have said February 1919, that's the ships he gets command. Now, here's the thing. We know he hit a trawler in Druid, because he was going too fast. We know he was going too fast in a shallow water area, which damaged the propeller of Murray. Which is why, well, it's an interesting one, because they say that he was... the official report says it happens in May, but the ship goes off to be refitted and checked out in dock and have it in April. So, seeing as that time period fits with checking and changing a propeller, I'd say it was probably April and the report's filed in May. I don't think either got off too badly. while in charge of every single one of these ships, every single one, he gets complimented for how fast he manages to get the ships to go. In a flotilla, which has got apparently the same top speed, because that's why they're grouped together, he's always described as managing to get a knot or more than them. He's always described as being the first ship. If we're not operating in order, you can guarantee the first ship to get there will be Dalrymple-Hamilton's. In fact, he just gets more and more into it as time goes on. You know, when he has command of the Gary, she's part of the 7th Destroyer Flotilla. And she's doing all sorts of fun little operations. She really is doing fun little operations at this point. She's part of the convoy system in the English Channel, doing escorts for ASW. Now, somehow, he did manage to miss Jutland. I'm not quite sure how, but in all his commands, he managed to miss being part of Jutland. He was very, very close to it. He always seems to be one step removed from getting to Jutland, but he managed to miss Jutland. But he's a skilled and capable captain. Must have been a safety valve open there somewhere. There were probably all sorts of things. And I would like to put this as evidence of him being a capable captain. Because look at how many times the Royal Navy has an option, its senior officers have an option of getting rid of him. Let's be honest, if a guy breaks a destroyer, you can justifiably get rid of him. They don't. Literally, it's almost the next day he's in charge of something else. He is... How do I put this politely? He always seems to be getting the speed from somewhere. Why am I currently getting a picture of him as a naval version of Jeremy Clarkson? Yes. And he's also getting the commands. Now, you could say, well, Alex, with his raw connections, of course he's going to get a command. The Royal Navy has generations of experience by this point of how to manage officers who have connections but not ability. They literally always find themselves on a battleship or a cruiser. They never get further than captain. If they can avoid it, they don't get further than commander. They find an excuse to siphon them off to another role. And most importantly, they are never left alone on a small ship. This is one of the interesting things I find about Mountbatten. Mountbatten is actually quite a good destroyer commander, believe it or not. There are many things wrong with Mountbatten. He's quite a good destroyer commander, but he's never trained for the heights of command he achieves. If you look at it, he basically goes from being a flotilla leader to being in charge of the Southeast Asia Command within a couple of years. He's basically promoted upwards constantly by Churchill and others interfering. And he's been given posts which are often being created, and it's the politicians reaching in and picking him up and put in there. He's a good destroyer commander. He is not trained and has not been prepared and properly educated for the roles he finds himself in. In fact, honestly, probably he never would have been. If you look at his career, Mountbatten had a ceiling. You can almost tell by the time an officer's getting towards captain what the ceiling will be, what they're being groomed for. What have their staff appointments been? What have their positions been in certain commands? Philip Vian's another good example. Philip Vian was trained from his entire career to be a war fleet commander. There is a reason why he's an Admiral of the Fleet, as decorated as he is, and doesn't serve as First Sea Lord. Doesn't get that. He is a 5-star Admiral of the Fleet. Doesn't get to be First Sea Lord. And think about how few of them there are in the Royal Navy post World War II. People who get the full Admiral Fleet, but don't become First Sea Lord. What is Dalrymple-Hamilton being trained for? I would argue he is coming through. He's certainly being groomed for Rear Admiral destroyers, for Destroyer Force already at this point. I would say that's coming through, and we'll start to see that as his career goes up. But also, I would say he's being trained up to be. This is going to sound strange, with his commands, etc. He's being trained up to be one of the commanders of one of the air regions of the UK. He's not being trained for wider operational strategic command, as in the Admiralty, the First Sea Lords. He's being trained for, well, I would say he probably get one of the minor. He'd probably get a minor command, sort of the South Atlantic Station, Caribbean, maybe the Indian Ocean, somewhere like that to command, and then would get somewhere like the Nore or Portsmouth or Scotland, actually, where he does end up. This is literally what he's being trained for. He is being given those skills. Not a desk job. And so, he's getting these posts, he's getting these experiences. But what he also is turning into, he's turning into a reliably aggressive officer who's going to push his ships for everything he can get out of them. And that means he's going to push his crews. But he doesn't suffer mutinies. He doesn't suffer issues with crew morale and crew confidence. He is known amongst his crews as someone who will make sure they're well fed, make sure they're well looked after. In many ways, there is a very strong similarity between him, Creswell, and Vian. They all have a similar style. They all have a similar style in that they have an authority. They are going to expect the best from themselves. They expect the best from others because they expect that from themselves. But they also demand they be treated the best. This is the sort of guy who he is going to tell you that you have to give 150% of your energy for your effort for whatever's being done. You're going to go and push above and beyond. But don't worry, he's going to support you every single step of the way. And oh, by the way, his crew are looking hungry. However, we have got some extra food. Oh, some salmon has arrived. Where did the salmon come from? I don't know, but my crew looked hungry, so I thought they should have some fresh salmon. And things like that. He's not afraid to use his connections to make sure they benefit his crew. It's the sort of maneuvers which, let me put it this way, in wartime can really make the difference to crew morale. If you can pull it off. They don't expect the crew won't expect it of an officer who can't pull it off. But if you're an officer who has those connections, who has those skills, and you don't, or worse, you pull it off but just feed you, you're going to be in trouble for morale. And so, this is what he is. And those ships he commands, look at them all. They're small, lean, dangerous machines. Some of them, you would not honestly get me doing what they did in them. Look, one of the things I love about being a historian is you very quickly start to realize if there are braver people than you in this world. Either braver, possibly less, possibly stupider, with less value of their skin. I don't know which, but one or the other. I think they're braver than me. I think they're very much braver than me. And that's the reality. Because with these vessels, they are pushing them at the top of their speed. They're pushing them as fast as they can. And yet, you know, look at what they're in. The waves are quite honestly bigger than their own ships. And they're pushing them out there. And yeah, 25.5 knots. Official top speed. Unofficial top speed. Whatever you can get out the engines. Whatever you can get out the engines. Now, after war service, he does have to spend some time in hospital. He's admitted to Queensferry Hospital for influenza. He's basically worked himself to illness. But don't worry. You can't keep a good man down for long. You really can't. If you consider that his command of Murray ends in February 1919, and he gets command of Sturgeon in February 1919. You know? It takes skill. It takes skill. And he's commanded them all. All of these, he's commanded as a lieutenant. This is the important thing to say. He is a lieutenant when he's commanding these. He does not achieve the rank of lieutenant commander until August 1919. When he's on his 9th command, 7th ship. Think about that. When it comes to promotions, when it comes to looking for senior officers, imagine this. I've got a lieutenant commander who I'm promoting to commander who has been a division officer, has been a gunnery officer, an executive officer on a cruiser. Good man. Got the experience on a cruiser. Or I've got someone who's already commanded... Well, by the time, if I'm promoting from lieutenant commander to commander, has commanded already 8 different destroyers and 10 different commands being in charge. Now, why does this matter? One of the myths I constantly rail against and constantly have fun dealing with in terms of naval history, and one of the things which often gets me accused of being a T-boo, is my shooting down the myth that the Royal Navy was run in World War II by battleship admirals. It really wasn't. Neither was the US Navy. The Royal Navy, the US Navy, most navies in the world were being run by destroyer admirals. And there is a reason for this. Because they rack up the experience of command more than any other branch of the Navy. More than any other branch of the Navy, they rack up command experience. Let's put that again. Before he's even promoted to commander, he has commanded 8 different destroyers. 10 different commands is what is considered. He is, by that point, he's command, he's in 1924, he is 34 years old. And he's got all that experience behind him. He is 4 years younger than I am now. And he's had almost as many commands in the Royal Navy as the modern Royal Navy has frigates. And that's not a complaint about the modern Royal Navy, but that is a reality of when we're talking about the experience of officers in the 1920s and the 1900s versus the experience of officers today. Even the US Navy is like that today. Even the US Navy, as big as it is, they're not racking up command experience like this. Not this early. Mainly because you don't have small ships you can worry about them. And think about it from this way. There's at least 2 of those we have documented evidence he bashed up. He literally has bashed into a trawler, damaged the propeller, and he's still got all those commands and still racked up that experience. Starting profiling battleships, I think you might want to check what his actual experience of Nimitz was. Because you've just said he was submarines. And yes, he did command submarines. But what did he start off his career service in? And King was also not a battleship admiral, by the way. King was a carrier admiral. In a lot of his command experience. But once you start looking at the officers who are running the war, the ones who are commanding the task forces, Cunningham, destroyer admiral. Somerville, okay, comms guy. Go through the rest of the American admirals as well. You'll find a lot of them are destroyers because they have a solid experience of command. And the thing is, think about it sensibly from an admiral's perspective or someone in the office. I've got to put someone in command of this ship, or this mission, of this exercise, of this test, of this school. I've got to give someone a role to train future leaders. I've got to give someone a role to command. Do I want to pick an officer who has never been in command of anything before, directly, has never had the box stop with them, or do I want to use someone who's already been tested? You see, the thing is, if I'm picking for the kind of missions which are going to get you the fast-track promotions, I'm going to want to pick someone who I can rely on will actually exercise command appropriately. That's what I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick an officer who will reliably exercise command. And that's the thing, you're going to pick them. And that's the destroyer officer. Because they have these commands at such young ranks. There is actually an argument that that's one of the reasons why, put forward by one of my colleagues in a paper, and it was interesting to read, was that one of the reasons why modern navies do not like small ships is because they give junior officers a chance for command experience early on, which can disrupt the flow of promotions down through the people they're training them by give someone a chance to shine, which might mean they skip and disrupt the promotion line. So basically, that means you want to try and hold command positions back till they're as senior as you possibly can make it, so that they don't jump the queue, so to speak, by showing off skills early on. The other option is that you do it in peacetime because it causes more mature officers who've learnt to their position by not damaging your ships will keep your ships in better condition. And then come wartime, what you do is you fire them all and you replace them with their executive officers who might actually risk things, like the U.S. Navy did with their submarine force in World War II. To put it as point as Mark personally, a choice between a man who works solely in a system and a man who can be trusted for independent responsibilities. Yeah. And the thing is, at best, you would like an officer who can do both. You would really prefer an officer who could do both. But getting an officer who can do both is difficult. There are very few. I can think of very few who exercise that kind of level of approach. And if we, again, I can point to some of the admirals and some of the positions they're in, or officers and positions they're in this period, and what they're getting up to. And again, you can see their career profile, you can see what they are. Now, I also do love a destroyer named HMS Violent. I have no idea. I have ideas what the Type 83s might be called, but if they could bring back the V-class names for destroyers, I would love it, and I would want one called HMS Violent. Because, honestly, that is a cool name for a warship. HMS Violent. It would probably never get through today in the modern world, but I love it. The fact that we only had 4 of the V-class SSBNs, we should have had... Well, I always argue we should have had more than that of them, but, we'll leave that to one side. And, again, with these ships, he's building up experience. There is a lot of experience coming. Josh H, I'll leave that question because next week I'm doing, for my April the 1st video, Naval Historian does the SSDSR 2025. Let's see what let's see if they would make it as what sensible as I would. I'll leave that, discuss that then. But yeah, with violence never solves anything. Oh, just wait. Yeah, that's the thing. The thing you can have, violence never solves anything. Well, HMS Violent might solve that issue. It'd just be fun. And he commands her August 1922 to December 1922. And then he's made commander in December 1924. And in between these times, again, if we go back to this wonderful document, yeah, I'm talking about ADM 19652/52/243 here. That's what you're heading for at this point. If you want to go try and read along with me. If you want to try and read it along with me. I understand if you don't. In fact, I completely concur if you don't. It makes a lot of sense if you don't. But if you figure out roughly what is being said, and I do mean roughly because this is what I have even on the zoomed in. I'm going to show you the zoomed in screen. So if I go to screenshots, And I'm going to just do... Yeah. This is what I'm reading at the moment. This is what this is the section you have to read to try and figure out what he was getting up to in this period. I think he's on half pay for a bit. He does for a bit of half pay time to convalesce from his illnesses and various things. He also gets married in this period. He makes a very good connection with a lovely lady. I've already talked a bit about his wife because I've talked about the fact that what happens to his children and who their godparents are. But he gets married to Gwendolyn Peake in 1918. Their son is born in 1922. They have one son, 2 daughters. The son goes on to be a Royal Navy officer, and actually we'll be talking about him later because he's the gunnery officer aboard HMS King George V during the sinking of the Bismarck. And, well, as he, you know, their marriage, they stayed together their whole year, seemed to be very happy. She actually died in 1974, and he died in December 1974. And as I understand it, she went first, and he basically got everything in order, and then went himself. Oh, that's so much fun. Yes. Tim O'Neill, Destroyer said there's a special, but they beat those boats up pretty hard bad. R&R distorted shell spades and frames on the wall line forward was a yard favourite. They must pot them by ear. They do something. But yeah, if anyone can, you know, I have a rough idea what he does in this period, but this is the writing I was literally working through. So, pretty much when he's not, and I will say this, you know, when he is not at work, when he's not in those commands, he's basically attending schools, he's doing staff work, he's on half pay, he's attending to the royal family, he's doing all sorts of interesting things, it seems to me he's up to. But actually trying to work exactly what he's doing is fun. We do know he spends some time aboard Albert and Victoria, the royal yacht. But yeah, fun reading this. Oh, the original documents are quite well preserved. They're sitting in the National Archives, but, yeah. Trying to sort that out would be an interesting one. And trying to get the National Archives do all sorts of things with them. Myself, as said, my trick tends to be to try and imagine I'm writing and what movements am I making and what letters do those work with. That's normally what I work with. But, you know, it's fun. It is fun. I could have had a chance of reading alien manuscripts. And so, yeah, so if there are sort of gaps in what I'm talking about for his career, don't worry. There is a reason for those gaps. Now, with these commands, again, he's getting experience. And it's interesting to point that he gets a flotilla leader, HMS Keppel, when he's a commander in February 1925 to May 1925. And if you look up HMS Keppel in that period, what is she doing? What is HMS Keppel doing in that period? Well, She's not in reserve. She's in the Mediterranean Fleet. She's doing all sorts of duties. She had actually only been completed in April 1925, and so it's very much certain that he was her commissioning commander. He was her commissioning commander. Yeah, those documents, honestly, they're best to try and read is go and read them in the National Archives, but you can download them for free. There are lots of documents like that you can download from free from the UK National Archives. You just have to have a login and say that you're signed up to it. And you can read through all these documents. It's wonderful. You still have to spend a lot of time in the National Archives itself, but it's worthwhile having that, and it's one of the first things I do. Whenever I want to go and search people's histories, I go and see if they've actually digitalized their records and they've put them up on the National Archives, in which case you can log in and have a look through them. Oh, there are lots of systems, Moon. There are lots of systems. But as I said, what I tend to do is stand over, look at it, and stand over and just imagine like I'm writing and what I would need to, what shapes I need to do to get the pen to do that form, and try and reverse it from that. Various people are now working out what they need to read it. Some suggesting bourbon and whiskey, others suggesting copious amounts of chocolate. Yes, we're having fun. It is a lot of fun. Now, the thing is, you also get Spencer, which is also a Thornycroft type flotilla leader. And these are the flotilla leaders. And what's the interesting thing is, these are the sort of the World War One-ish, pre-World War One, end of World War One ships. This is what they sort of look like. This is what they're starting to look. This is what the post-World War One ships, destroyers, are starting to look like. It's very noticeable heading towards that standard Royal Navy form. And Keppel is already different because she has a crew of 164. Remember HMS Gary, his first command, had a crew of 70. Now he's on a ship which has 164. That's slightly more. That's slightly more. Also has 40,000 shaft horsepower, some steam turbines, still 4 Yarrow boilers, and her official top speed is 38 knots. Her official top speed is 38 knots. And also, she's 1,600 tons pretty much in standard, 2,000 tons full load. So again, compare that to HMS Gary. She is nearly 3 times the displacement in standard, and nearly 3 times the displacement in full load than his original command. And she's still a destroyer. And when he takes command of her, he's a commander, yes, but he's still relatively junior in the rank structure. Now, the point is, again, is she is a flotilla leader. So, if he's commanding her, what's he probably doing? Well, he's Deputy Flotilla Commander, I think, at this point. The Royal Navy hasn't yet standardized down to the smaller flotillas in this period, but they're probably heading there. And she has some good experience. She's named for Augustus Keppel, the Royal Navy Admiral. Always a good one to be named for. Spencer, he transfers into when she's down for duty, he transfers into Spencer to finish off his command. And again, This is experience. This is all him learning his trade. And again, similar comments are coming through, and it is beautiful when you read those comments about him going for speed, about all the things he's doing in that pursuit of speed, about how hard he's pushing his ships, how hard he's pushing his crew, what he's getting out of them. And this is really a period where he is pushing his crew. He is doing a lot with them. Now, he seems to also be able to get away with going off of family matters when he needs to, which is not bad. It's necessary sometimes to get off of family matters. But he does do, when he's serving, he serves wherever he's asked to. And he goes. And that's probably just as important. Now, next, he's made a captain. And what he does when he's made a captain is he's put in charge of HMS Malcolm. Now, you might be thinking, well, HMS Malcolm, what is she? Why is this important? Well, he's gone from being sort of deputy commander of a flotilla. They're not coal-fired. HMS Keppel is oil-fired. She carries 500 tons of short tons, 450 standard tons of oil. So they're oil-fired by this point. Now, there are two things which come through with Keppel. One, most of the ships after they spend time with him need their engines fixed. Two, he's always been commended for pushing his ships and getting extra speed out of his ships and his crews. Malcolm is rather an interesting vessel for him to be put in charge of because, well, at this point in her career, and this point in her service, she is the command of the Captain D of the Nor Destroyer Flotilla. Now, the Nor Destroyer Flotilla is the reserve force. And this is important because this says to me, okay, so you're building up his knowledge working with dockyards. There's an important point here. He's working with the reservists to keep destroyer skills sharp and also to keep an eye on the destroyers and to assess their viability for modern warfare. Nor Destroyer Flotilla is an important reserve formation because the Royal Navy can't keep in service, doesn't have enough money, and doesn't have enough personnel, and doesn't have particularly the inclination to keep running 250 destroyers the whole time. They're quite happy to let some happily rest somewhere, so they're not all burned out, so they're ready if you need a war. And he's doing this. This is also quite an important position because it means he's going to interface with the dockyards a bit. He's going to work with them. And this is after his being aboard Keppel. This is after his command of Keppel. And remember, Keppel he'd commissioned, and then she'd gone off to the 3rd Destroyer Flotilla to serve on the China station. So he'd worked her up, made her viable, and then she'd gone off to there. When it comes to Malcolm, when he's got command of her, by the time he gets command of her, he's getting command of the Nor Destroyer Flotilla. He's in charge of reserves. And by the way, he's taking over from William J. Whitworth, That's Jock Whitworth. And he'll be succeeded by Creswell. It's interesting to think that. He'll be succeeded in post by Creswell. Creswell, of course, is the guy who ends up being in charge of the first commander of a tribal-class destroyer flotilla. And this is where these officers come from. Now, that's a question we'll answer later on. At the moment, we're kind of early in the career point. To sort of get to that point, we'll get to that when he's giving Commander Rodney, and I'll explain that then. Falankeno, do any reports from dock managers who had to repair the engines of the ships afterwards, after they played with Hamilton to survive, and how unpublished were they? Look. The amount of time his ships end up spending with various dockyards, he must have known his managers rather well. But I think possibly again, considering none of them committed harikiri on him or anything like that, he probably bribed them with suitable lubrication. Or maybe he just started off. I'm starting to wonder whether before he even, the moment he got command of a ship, he just sent the local dockyard commander a whole box of freshly caught salmon and some whiskey, and basically just sent it through to him, and just went, this is a nice, friendly present from me. Hope you like me. Hope you love me. Sort of thing. And he does seem to have been above average in terms of fixing his own destroyers as well. He is pretty good at the engineering side. He seems to have an understanding of how to get them to work, and does seem to work with them. His modus operandi, as is described, is that he's very much a small ship man. And that's an interesting description to use in the Royal Navy. And a small ship man is usually describing someone who works very closely with their NCOs and officers, and tries to foster a team with them. The Royal Navy has certain phrases which happen in this sort of period. Small ship man comes about. It's often associated with some destroyer officers. There's also the phrase hero. You never want to be attached with hero by your name, because that means you don't bring everyone with you. You want to charge off on your own. And those officers will not get promoted. It's interesting to note that the Royal Navy really doesn't like heroes. They want officers who are aggressive, yes, but bring their team with them. They want heroic ships, not heroic captains, if that makes sense. And it does to me from looking at the Navy. My God, no need to do anything now. Yeah, there might be something paying up with the internet. I'm not sure what's going on this evening. There could be some fun. But yeah, thank you, Michael. But yeah, I get messages occasionally, so I know what's going on. Don't worry, suddenly dips down for some reason. And I have no idea why, and why the internet's playing up this evening. It just is. Starlink is up, so it should all be working. But we'll see. Sunspots. Possibly it's sunspots, possibly it's BT internet mucking about. I can check the individual systems. It's useful to do, sometimes do a check quickly. Especially if it's causing enough trouble that someone's complaining about it in the chat. I know, Michael, you weren't complaining, but there is no other phrase to really describe it. Oh, find the Netgear password. and check the system quickly. Yeah, da 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 da. I'm sure I saved it. Yeah, it's not logging in tonight. I'll sort it out. It might be something to do with the various different things working. But yeah. Anyway. Where was I after that interruption? Sorry about that. But I try and fix these things when I can. Where was I? I was... Oh, yeah. HMS Rodney. So yeah, he's a small ship man. And he's good at it, this job. He's good at, you know... I said, you know, the Royal Navy doesn't want heroes. They want heroic ships, not heroic officers who want to push their own on their own. And a small ship man will work with is someone who's described as working with their NCOs, working with their junior officers, and trying to push them up and get them to work together. And you know, that's a good thing. Especially for organising reserves. But, of course, that's not where he ends up. Because he does something interesting. He then moves on to 4th Flotilla. And he gets HMS Keith this time. And HMS Keith is a nice ship to be put in charge of. She is. Get my notes up because for some reason I closed them down. Oh, yeah. She's a nice ship. She's, you know, getting command of her, operating her, taking her off to the Mediterranean. While out there in August 1936, that's after he's been in charge, she that's actually collided with a Greek steamship, the Antonius Gelonus, in the English Channel. But she basically remains her entire time in the Mediterranean fleet. That's what she's operating with. And 4th Flotilla is operating out there, part of the force which is dealing with the Spanish Civil War, the Abyssinia crisis. Now, the Spanish Civil War doesn't technically take place in this time period, but it's building up to it, and they're trying to do deterrence operations. The Abyssinia crisis does, of course, and they're always trying to manage those issues. And they're also trying to work up the destroyers. Now, I would say, at this point, he is being highly complimented as being a very aggressive and fast officer by the Rear Admiral destroyers at this point. A guy called Andrew Cunningham. Andrew Cunningham is fun. Having him compliment you is pretty darn good. And it's pretty darn important and capable for you. It shows how your quality of service and what you're managing. It really does. Now, on top of that, sorry, brain went dead for a second. On top of that, let's get back to the script. Get some more iron brew. Now, you see, now I'm worrying about all the computer stuff. It's going through my head non-stop, trying to figure out what's causing the issue and why it keeps going up and down. I was hoping it wasn't causing you guys any problems. It's only said it's dropped 10% of frames to me, so I hoped it was okay. But now I've been told by Michael it's going terrible. It's now in my head, and I'm worrying what's happening, going on, and what I can do to fix it. Let's see. What can I do? Okay, let's just carry on. Hopefully it's good enough you're hearing it all, and hopefully it's getting through okay. But in charge of 4th Flotilla, what he's been primarily doing is taking part in a lot of naval exercises. He's demonstrating the destroyer force. He's pushing forward aggressively, especially being useful in night operations and night training. One of the things, some of the exercises he gets involved are critical attack exercises, in terms of how you're going to use destroyers as independent operators, how they could attack cruisers, how they could maneuver. A lot of the formations, such as the box formation, which is used by Royal Navy destroyers in the hunt for the Bismarck, in the pursuit of Bismarck, when tribals are positioning themselves around Bismarck. Yeah. But a lot of the command and discussions for it, when I put around and things like that, discussions for like the box command. I'm now repeating myself, aren't I? Michael, just I know you don't mean to, but just no. Okay, thank you. Because I'm just, the more I hear about it, the more I'm going to think about it in my head, and that's going to distract me from doing this stuff. And I want to get this right for Dalrymple-Hamilton. So, you know. Yeah, don't just ignore Raleigh on the camera. Raleigh doesn't care. Key part of developing the Royal Navy destroyer tactics that are used in World War II. For example, the box command and the box procedure, which they use on Bismarck, and the tribal class destroyers are used on Bismarck, where they position themselves at either corner round Bismarck, so they won't engage each other, and then just go in. You know, they take it in turns during the night to attack, which of course Piron is part of, and of course. Recently, there was a whole big fuss made by certain people going, "Oh, Piron's this amazing thing. She was doing this attack," and one of the things they put on was attack was solo. And I thought that was both rude to the Piron crew, because it wasn't solo. They were coordinating with these other 4 destroyers and working with them, and the tribals get forgotten as well. And this is the scenario you're dealing with. The ships are basically doing their job of boxing in their ship, or boxing in an enemy capital ship overnight. They're about surface raider tactics and dealing with surface raiders. And so this is the criteria they're working for. This is the criteria they are working for very much. And it's because they start doing these practices in the 1930s, and developed also in the 1930s, that Piron ends up doing what she does during the battle, because she hasn't had those 10 years of practicing, that 10 years of developing that doctrine, that 10 years of how to engage this. And in many ways, Dalrymple-Hamilton is an example of this, and he's part of the personnel that trained this out of the Royal Navy Destroyer Force and get this out of them. Because what he's doing is he's demonstrating constancy of his command of 4th Flotilla, and therefore demonstrating to other junior officers this is how you command them, that what matters is you get to the enemy. Doesn't matter if you damage your engines. Doesn't matter if you actually run into other ships. What matters is you do the job. You get to the enemy. You engage the enemy. You want to go garden now. I've just got this working again, and you want to go garden. I'll be back in a second, because otherwise we'll have a poodle mucking around the whole time. Riley, going garden. sisters. I haven't even given you the biscuit yet, and you're looking on the floor for the biscuit. You're fun, you know. You are. In the boo form. There we go. Right. That was quick. Riley always takes over the stream. So, with these tactics being developed, and with especially the example that Dalrymple-Hamilton's getting, this is part of the inoculation of that destroyerman culture the Royal Navy prides itself on. The idea of these aggressive officers who are going to charge towards the enemy. That is what Dalrymple-Hamilton exemplifies. And so, it's rather unsurprisingly... No, the boilers were not exploding. They weren't exploding. They were being pushed hard, but not exploding. Rather unsurprisingly, that one of his next commands is the Royal Navy College at Dartmouth. But before we get into that, it's Seamus Booklog time. Now, I usually like this point in a video because I have a clear break in my notes and I know where I am and I won't miss stuff from this point. So it's always quite a good, thing of having the shameless book plug. It's also where I get to say thank you to all of you for your support and your kindness and understanding. And especially through weird IT issues. Which I'm not sure why it's behaving weirdly this evening, because everything I can see on the results is that it should be fine. It should be fine. I'm not sure why it's not. I'll have to figure out for some reason my Netgear password, despite me noting it down, has disappeared. I'll have to try and track that down somewhere. I must have put it down somewhere, but, I cannot find it at the moment. And, thank you everyone for all your support and kindness. And thank you for helping the channel grow and liking, sharing, subscribing, doing all the things you do. It's fun. Jonathan Moon. Oh, if I'm in the area, odds are you signing my copy? Yeah, always happy to. Hello. You can look as gorgeous as you like. But no. No. If they did on like one ship, wouldn't they be just, we don't want the happening, but the rest of you got to the enemy or more, that can never happen again type of thing? Honestly, if the boilers had actually blown up on a ship, I could imagine the Royal Navy would have made strong questions about the boiler manufacture. Because the thing is, everything was supposed to have a large margin of safety. A large margin of safety. And... that's useful. That's what allows you to push things. Also, if you have a good engineering crew, they can judge where the edge of that equipment can go. Poodle pats. Definitely poodle pats going on. And that's the point, really. If you're prepared to work with and listen to your engineers instead of just making demands on them, you can probably get a lot more of them. In the case of Dalrymple-Hamilton, he's lucky because he comes through in the period where pretty much even the non-engineering officers would do some time in engineering assisting when they had major work going on. Even the non-engineering officers would spend time doing that. And so, he knew a chunk about engineering. He knew a chunk about being in charge of these things and sorting these things out and working with the various officers in his formation and the NCOs. And he's very much, I would say... I don't think Dalrymple-Hamilton is necessarily the person you go to think up a grand strategy. But he will think up some very pretty nasty tactics. And he is definitely someone who you go to if you want a force run hard and working well. Yeah. If the boiler blows... The Royal Navy has had boilers blow up, trust me. But... I think also one of the reasons why the Royal Navy keeps the boiler types it does in World War II, and certainly one of the reasons for that policy, is that it enables them to utilize what they need to utilize. In terms of those boilers, if they're pushing them harder, if you're working with very high pressure steam, you're already at the limit of what the metallurgy and systems can deal with. If you're designed to work with higher pressure steam, and maybe your boilers are stressed for something slightly more, you can push it a bit more and get more out of it without as much effort, without the same sort of level of effort. But again, it's all going to affect your wear and tear of your ship. And this is an important factor to remember. A lot of the limits which govern naval operations in peacetime, while still being relevant to good maintenance and good order of a ship in wartime, can be adjusted to an extent depending on the circumstance. You know, the Royal Navy has procedures. I always remember Steve George. It was talking about bilge pumps. There was a discussion about aircraft engineering in the Falklands War. Do you want to go to bed? No? Then stop this, because I'm not being blackmailed. Now, no. You will go to bed. That's what you're getting. You're not getting anything else at the moment. Because you bashed me in the head with your toy, and you've had the bickies you're allowed. There's no more. You've got your food bowl over there. You're being very disruptive this evening, and that's not good fair for you or the people watching. It's not. Now, with the thing is, you know, when they work, they do adjust, as Steve George said, the aircraft engineering from Steve George, and we talked about this in Bilge Pumps a while back, we had him on. In the Falklands War, at the start of the Falklands War, when his squadron was sent south on HMS Invincible, he was starting to go through the squadron, putting them on wartime service regs, which reduced the servicing requirements. And his commander, who was in charge of him, because he was the junior engineering officer, the senior engineering officer told him, why? Why? And he went, well, that's what we do, we're in wartime. No, not until it's necessary. Until it's necessary, we will keep to full peacetime maintenance requirements. Full peacetime service requirements to keep these aircraft in as good a condition as we can possibly maintain them. And that's when you start to realise that the Royal Navy has a habit that has been going on for hundreds of years of over-maintaining their ships. They over-maintain their ships, they over-maintain their aircraft. And there is a reason for that. It, A, allows them to push them harder when they need to, but B, it guarantees they work when they need them to. Push them harder when they need to, and guarantees they work when they need to. The Royal Navy does a complete rebuild of their airframes every few years. They literally strip the aircraft down to its bare frame, take everything out, check everything, and rebuild it. Literally will do that. And they do that more often than any other service in NATO. USN does the same. It's something which navies tend to do more than others because they operate in saltwater environment. It caused a huge kerfuffle in Britain when the Commando Helicopter Force was formed, and basically the Navy insisted that the other services had to accord with the Navy service profile for helicopters. And the services went, but that's going to cost us more money and we don't need to do that. The Royal Navy went, well, we're not dilating our service for you. So if we've got to have common standards, then you've got to come up to our standards. And it costs more money. And there is a very good argument in a non-saltwater environment, you do not need to do anywhere near that level of maintenance as often as they do. So you can understand why the other services were where they were. But it's the same today on all the modern ships as well. And so this is the thing. If you have an over-maintained asset that you are sure is going to work, that you know that your people are experts in, you can push things where they can be pushed. A steam boiler is something that can be pushed if it's well cared for when you need it to. And this is what the destroyers do. And again, if we're talking about HMS Keith or HMS Keppel, HMS Keppel has a theoretical top speed of 38 knots. HMS Keith has a theoretical top speed of 35 knots. Knight, you need to be. Ooh. Yeah, that's an interesting statement to make, but not relevant really to the topic here or discussion here. And yeah, not necessarily the scenario you need to think of. So, Captain of Royal Navy College, Dartmouth. This is the position he's in from December 1936 to November 1939. And this is an important position. If you can think about it, the Royal Navy for 3 years, pretty much 3 years, prior to World War II, the guy in charge of training their junior officers, of the brand new midshipmen officers coming into service in the Royal Navy, is Dalrymple-Hamilton. A guy who has quite literally busted destroyers. Who has run everything as aggressively and as fast as he can for his entire career. And he's the living example you're putting in charge of them. Think about this from a practical experience. This means that pretty much any junior officer that's likely to serve under him, that is a midshipman, is likely to have been trained by him. Quite a lot of the junior lieutenants in the Royal Navy are going to be trained by him. For 3 years. He is in charge. He is the example chosen by the Sea Lords to give to their junior officers of how to be an officer. Because yes, there are other instructors there, there are other officers there, there's the captain engineering to do their engineering instruction, all these things. But he is the captain of the college. He is the captain of the college. It's a post, which is more important almost than any other to the character of the service. He is literally being held up as the example for them to build the culture of their junior officers going into service around. An officer who prioritizes the mission and the success of the operation second only to the survivability of his crew. The only thing he puts higher than throwing everything into his commands is throwing everything into his crew. I'd say that's a pretty good officer to have there, but I'd also say that's an officer which is kind of setting you up for a very specific style of leadership and a very specific style of junior officer. It's important, again, it's useful, but it's kind of special. Now, with that being said, and maintaining an eye on everything that's going on, let's skip to the next one. Because his command after that is HMS Rodney, who he will command from November 1939 to July 1941. He commands from November 1939 to July 1941. Why do you put this officer? Why do you put an officer who is a speed demon in a battleship? Well, let's think about this. The Royal Navy has two battleships which are the anchors of their battle line, are some of the most powerful warships in the world at this time, but they're slow. They are very much the product of politicians and Beatty's appeasement of those politicians to defend his Jutland legacy in the 1920s. They are politicians who imagine them as unsinkable bulwarks of the battle line. But they're also two vessels which are as powerful as they can be. Now the thing is, yes, you could put Dalrymple-Hamilton in a faster vessel. You could put him in Renown. You could put him in Repulse, in Hood. But if you put him in there, he's going to do everything he can to make that ship as fast as he can get it. This is a man who on pretty much every single report about him as a commanding officer has been called fast or variations thereof. Reports him, he always seems to be a knot or two ahead. He always seems to get there first. He always is first to the fray. He's always fast. His ships are always faster than expected. Now the thing is, if you've got a captain like that, then just maybe, he can get something out of her. Because the Royal Navy knows the hull form's quite good. The hull form is built for far faster than she actually technically as she goes. And again, please note what happens after he leaves her. She has to have her engines refitted. Now, to be fair, Rodney had an interesting career already. She had. And I would say possibly the fastest he gets her up to is probably her pursuit of Gneisenau. I'm not sure if he gets her quite up to that speed with the pursuit of the Bismarck. But again, it's an interesting time with the pursuit of Bismarck. That's a different story, though. We're going to talk about his first getting command of her, because the moment he gets in command of her, His first mission is to go off hunting for Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. She develops problems with her rudder, though, and is forced to return to Liverpool steering on engines for repairs which last till 31st of December. Now, by the way, those repairs to her rudder also, for some reason, included some work carried out by her engineering team on her engines. I'm not sure why, I'm not sure what they did, but it is well known that they took advantage of the dockyard and the facilities of the dockyard, which were helping out with the rudder issues, to do some things to their engines. Now, HMS Nelson, of course, gets damaged in the 4th of December, so Rodney now can no longer serve as a private ship. She has to become a flagship and a fleet flagship until her sister returns, until Nelson returns in August 1940, which is just annoying. It's just annoying. She has fun, though. She keeps doing her duty. She gets visited by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, that's the Queen Mother, when they're visiting Scottish shipyards in February. And Winston Churchill comes aboard her, and apparently doesn't get into an argument, manages to not get into an argument with Dalrymple-Hamilton about the design of the unsinkable bulwark and how useful she's going to be, because he's predicting that she's one of the most useful ships in the fleet. And there's probably Dalrymple-Hamilton going, yeah, if you give me a few more knots when you'd built her, then she'd be more useful to me. But I'll do my best. I'll catch something. When she's sortied in April 1940, well, to go and try and hunt some German warships in the North Sea, she's actually hit by a 500 kilogram, that's a 1,000-pound bomb on 9th of April off the southwest coast of Norway. The bomb, though, how do I put this? It hit the corner of an armoured 4.7-inch ready ammunition box and broke up on the deck after the funnel. It still went off, and its fragments did penetrate through various unarmoured decks to get to the armoured deck, and managed to start a small fire in a galley, but, you know, it worked around, and, well, to be honest, they managed to get everything working through. 3 men were wounded, 15 got electrical burns, because the water that was being used to fight the fire managed to go into a junction box, so it was more Runon's fault than Dalrymple-Hamilton, as Runon's here and in chat, and of course Runon is a resident electrician, so Runon gets the blame for all electrical issues. But it's fun, you know. They managed to make temporary repairs. She didn't go home till the 17th of April, and she was out again in June to try and hunt German ships again. And she just keeps going back and forth between her role as flagship of the home fleet and doing various other duties because, well, she swaps in and out with Nelson doing the role. And she actually has orders to attack a German invasion fleet in the English Channel when when she's transferred to Rosyth in 23rd of August. The idea was that if the Germans launched Operation Sea Lion, she would be one of the vessels which would charge into the Channel. Lord help anyone who got caught by her. You know, they're having fun. Then Jervis Bay is sunk by the Admiral Scheer, and Nyas now and Scharnhorst are out hunting. And when they're out hunting, well, Rodney goes out hunting for them and keeps going out hunting for them. Every time they go out, she goes out hunting for them. And it's the 16th of March 1941 that they have real fun because Gneisenau was rescuing survivors from the Chilean reefer. Rodney steams over the horizon. And she spots her, and she's at the maximum range for Rodney's guns. Now, the thing is, he comes over the horizon and is doing pretty much maximum speed he can get out of Rodney. The German vessel Gneisenau only starts to pull away according to her reports and the reports from her when she's going over 26 knots. Dalrymple-Hamilton is described as declining to pursue Gneisenau once she reaches 31 knots, and was able to rescue some of the survivors and seamen from a lifeboat before returning to the convoy that she was supposed to be covering. The thing is, again, this happens, but she is tooling around, doing her best at operations. And yeah, it's at this point also she, in April this year, 1941, she sinks the Topaz. It's an armed trawler. She rams it. And 4 survivors were rescued from the Topaz by destroyers nearby. Roughly 4. We think 4. Some people suggest there are less, and it's only 2. But 4 seems to be what they're agreed. If any of Gneisenau's boilers had been cold, they would have been in trouble. Because their distance is reckoned to be roughly the maximum range of Rodney's guns. And one of the reasons why Rodney doesn't fire at that point is she's so close to the merchant ship they might hit the merchant ship. But once she starts to pull away, she needs to pull away fast. If she had been stopped rather than circling round, Gneisenau would have been sunk. Hamilton was handicapped by Ronno's worn-out engines. He was working on the engines, okay? He was working on the engines. And that then brings us to the Bismarck, because the Bismarck is the fun little battle for the Rodney. It really is a fun battle for Rodney. In the case of it allows the commanders to really push themselves. Ronan is not liking taking the blame for the electrical issues. I can see what's happening in the chat. Oh. So, when Bismarck was coming out, she was actually escorting the Britannic on her way to Halifax with 4 destroyers. And she was scheduled to go to Boston for repairs and a refit. She was carrying all the materials needed for that, such as spare boiler tubes and some octable pom-pom mounts. And the crates of the Elgin marbles and things like that are supposedly aboard. She was carrying some special documents to the United States, the American Naval Attaché, various military passengers going to Canada. Britannic was taking civilians. She'd be bringing troops back to Canadian troops back and airmen back to Britain. But Rodney's also loaded. But on the 24th of May, and they'd left on the 22nd of May, so 2 days later, 2 days into their voyage, Bismarck sinks Hood during the Battle of Denmark Strait. And Rodney's ordered to join the pursuit, leaving HMS Eskimo, Somali, Mashona, and Tartar. Well, she leaves Eskimo to escort the Britannic, and she takes Somali, Mashona, and Tartar with her. So, The escort for the Britannic was Rodney and 4 tribal-class destroyers. Rodney and 4 tribal-class destroyers. And then it's Rodney going off with 3 tribals, 2 solo. Now, we can all imagine the battle if Bismarck runs into Rodney with 3 tribal-class destroyers. This is not a good scenario for anyone. That means you have basically 4 destroyer commanders, one of whom's in charge of a battleship, but all 4 are absolutely equally insane and unconvinced by the laws of anything in terms of size versus them. If I was Bismarck at that point, I would be running as fast as I could. Now, then Suffolk radios in, this is lovely cruiser Suffolk, that she'd lost radar contact with her on the 25th of May. Now, what does Dalrymple-Hamilton do with this? You know, he's heard she's lost contact. What does he do? Well, he gathers his senior officers together, including the American naval attaché, and they decide that the German ship would probably head for Brest. So, they set course to head her off. Now, this is where the American attaché gives us evidence that she was reaching 25 knots. As he understood it, he thought she was reaching 25 knots, which exceeds her design speed by roughly 2 knots. This caused mechanical failures, not too dissimilar to the same mechanical failures reported after she'd been chasing the Gneisenau. So, yeah. Now, in a true style, and again, remember, this is the guy who commanded 4th Destroyer Flotilla, which was then commanded by Creswell, and which was then commanded by Vian. Vian's currently in charge of 4th Destroyer Flotilla. That's the Tribal Destroyer Flotilla, the second one, the Mediterranean one. And here's the thing, as we all know famously, Vian, when he gets without orders, charges across the Atlantic to where he thinks the Bismarck's gonna be. Turns up on time. Well, Dalrymple-Hamilton, when he gets the orders from John Tovey about what to do and to go northwest, he knows his ship's too slow to catch up the Bismarck if she's heading that direction. So he disregards and ignores it. He ignores it. He gets the signal, he doesn't take any notice of it. And then at 11:40, he's of course told by the Admiralty that they think that Bismarck is probably headed to Brest or Saint-Nazaire. And so he alters the course slightly further southeast, but he is positioning himself between the Bismarck and home. And this is always the interesting thing to me, is if the Bismarck did turn for home, did manage to break off earlier and head for home earlier, the chances are she runs into Rodney and 3 Tribal-class destroyers solo. Chances are. Poseidon 7307. Engine telegraph. Speed change order. From flank bell to go. I think it's basically all ahead with everything you've got. Yeah, I will try and do that, Ronan. When I'm going to get to the question period at the end, I will put in 0.15 and see if that works. And yeah, if we consider Bismarck's already got the damage from Prince of Wales, there could be fun here going on here. Specifically, Dalrymple-Hamilton is obeying specific orders coming out to him from the Admiralty. But if it's just a general order that he can ignore, he's ignoring it. Now, when he gets to 9 o'clock at night, and by the way, at this point, it was interesting, at about 1600 hours on that day, and this is, of course, the 25th of May, Bismarck passed her roughly 25 nautical miles away. He passed within 25 nautical miles of Bismarck. They didn't spot her by 9 o'clock that night, and so they turned southeast again, heading for Brest. It's at the 26th of May that, well, the lovely Bismarck is spotted by a Catalina flying boat. And it's at this point that Tovey realizes a mistake, and they start to meet up. The sad thing is, though, think about this, 25 nautical miles. If the radars had detected her, if anything they had on her had detected, and thank you Team Locker for the memberships, then there is the chance at 25 nautical miles, that's roughly 46 kilometers away, whilst it's unlikely she would catch her herself, the tribal certainly would. And they could follow her, and everyone else could track in. So Bismarck was very lucky at that point. Not sure if Dalrymple-Hamilton will agree it's very lucky at that point, because then it would be a very different end to Bismarck. And let's be honest, if Bismarck had been soloed by Rodney, Dalrymple-Hamilton's career would have probably gone... Because look at Admiral Fraser's career after he destroys Scharnhorst and North Cape with just Duke of York. Now, with all this weather going on, and there was a lot of heavy weather going on, and with all the issues, the two battleships managed to join up so Tovey could take charge. Rock Royal launches some attacks using her aircraft, and again, it's one of the things of there's a difference between Victorious, which was loaded with basically been loaded at the beginning of the operations with air crew who had literally just been put aboard. They just formed up her air group and put aboard, and they didn't have a full complement. To Ark Royal's air group, which are very much worked up, have a lot of experience. And honestly, the Royal Navy at this point this is the point at which the Royal Navy starts doing that policy of splitting up squadrons to create new squadrons, rather than creating new squadrons from scratch. What they like to do is now, at this point, take half a squadron, put a half a squadron of veterans in, add in new people, preferably leaven out some of the new people with people who've been instructors, and that's your new squadron. And that preserves more institutional memory and capability within the force. But of course, even with those experienced pilots, they still mistake Sheffield for Bismarck and attacker. It's always good to be a town-class cruiser. Let's be honest though, the town-class cruisers, like the Travel-class destroyers, have been designed to look like cruisers. The town-class cruisers did look like battleships. Look at them in profile, and look at the Royal Navy's battleships, and you will see what I mean. There is a profile similarity going on there. The Royal Navy had done this so as to confuse enemy pilots. It worked on their own though as well. Now, this is when also the Royal Navy has the joyous thing of faulty magnetic detonators. Because 5 of the torpedoes that dropped, how do I put this, of the 5 and 11 torpedoes that were dropped, detonated due to faulty magnetic detonators is what was described. But also there's the possibility they weren't dropped at the correct heights. One of the things about Royal Navy torpedoes, and again, if I find my fluffy torpedo, one of the problems with the Royal Navy torpedo is in some ways it is a bit of an over-engineered product, because it's very good for doing these strikes. Because as I said before, the Royal Navy has a tension wire, which means that the torpedo is going to belly flop, which is great for keeping it level in the water. But the thing is that you have to judge the water level pretty well. And if you've got a very rough sea, that's more difficult to judge. My toy, not yours. And so this is the scenario we've got. When you've got more of a rough sea, you can judge, the height's more difficult to judge. And the trouble is, if the tension wire runs out, A, it won't belly flop, so that's more likely to cause damage. But also there's the possibility that as it's coming down, a wave hits it and a wave clips the tail, and that will cause issues as it's entering in the water, which can also damage it. Tends to get blamed on the magnetic detonators, because that's a nice easy thing to blame, because you can go, oh, it's a faulty magnetic detonator, we didn't set it correctly. And that excuses the pilots, and the fitters go, that's life. But there are slightly more complications than just that. There you go. Here's very cute, but no, you're not allowed a plushy torpedo. If the giant plushy torpedo comes, no, you're still not allowed it, okay? You're still not allowed it. If a giant plushy torpedo arrives, you're still not allowed it. I love you dearly, but I will not share my plushy torpedo with you. No. But I will be nice and give you a biscuit. How's that sound? Didn't notice. What it did make them realise is it's often said as it made them realise it wasn't working, etc. But honestly, what they did next was their next launch was that they used the contact detonators rather than the magnetic detonators. And again, the thing is about the contact detonators is they're slightly less fragile, but also the 15 Swordfish who do that attack, they are slightly different in terms of their grouping. Now, also, there's the fact that how do I put this? There's a difference in between attacking a ship at sea with torpedoes in a mass group attack and attacking a ship in exercise and attacking a ship in harbour. And the attacks at sea had been quite rare up to this point. So the thing is, that's also part of the scenario you have going on. But yes, they did blame it on the magnetic detonators, but also blaming on the magnetic detonators and changing for contact detonators is a very easy way to restore morale. Oh no, it wasn't your fault. You've got to go out and do this again, but we don't want you thinking it's your fault. Again, think of it as psychological management of the crew. If you send them out with the exact same things again, do it, they're going to think it's going to be the same again, it's going to see the same again. What's the point of this? Our torpedoes are going to miss. All these things. But if you give them, say, oh no, it wasn't your fault, it's the magnetic detonators that are at fault, have some contact detonators. No. No. Have some contact detonators. Then they're going to go, oh, it wasn't my fault, I'm still a great pilot, and go off and do the really brave thing again. And that's part of the scenario you have to think about. No. No. It's a complete sentence. Yes, the poodle has got a haircut. Yes, he's even more demanding than normal because of it. He's even more of a prima donna than normal. Now, with this being said, if they've got the morale up, if they're capable and if they're confident about what they're doing now, they'll go and deliver on it. And that's what they do. They manage to go and secure some hits. And the thing is, the torpedo hits, there are 3 torpedoes hit then. 2 strike forward. They don't cause significant damage, but they do cause issues with the plating. They do cause issues with lots of little things, which builds up. And the last strikes the stern, which disables the steering and causes her to have to reduce her speed. Night Signal everyone, there are problems with magnetic detonators, yes, but sometimes those problems are stressed more than they need to be, or more than they were actually historically when you look into it. I just told you I gave you exact example of other things which affected the torpedoes, and which quite well do, and which were known to affect the torpedoes in terms of angle of launch, height of the waves, and all those factors, which are all affected. There's also the pilot confidence in a maneuver. And so the easiest thing to do, if you... what I'm saying is blanketly blaming the magnetic detonators for all those issues is not the right thing to do. It doesn't add up with the evidence. But it does make sense for the Royal Navy to do it, especially at that time, in that moment, from terms of a personal psychological management of their personnel. Okay? So that being said, they start engaging. They've managed to slow her down. She's now limited in speed. And so they decide what they can do. Mashona and Somali have to be detached that evening to refuel. And Rodney is falling in behind King George V. Now here is the interesting thing. Tovey decides that he's going to reduce speed, saving fuel, and he wants to wait till dawn. Why? Because whilst he can do things with our systems, daylight engagements are going to be best, and it's going to be most advantageous for his ships, and also it will give him maximum time to sink the German ship. They don't want them trying to get away in the dark. And of course, that night, the Bismarck spent its entire night being tormented by the Trouble-class destroyers of Philip Vian's fourth destroyer flotilla, with Pirin, of ORP Pirin of the Polish Navy, and basically spend their entire night tormenting it by firing torpedoes at it, charging at it, keep coming from different directions. They box it in, as talked about earlier, that tactic which Dalrymple-Hamilton had been key to developing in 4th Flotilla in the Mediterranean in the 1930s, and pushing forward, and they box her in, and they just keep attacking throughout the night. Now, King George V was the first to spot Bismarck, probably about 08:43 hours, but Rodney spots her at 08:44. And it's Rodney which opens fire first, firing at 08:47 hours. Bismarck responds with 08:49 hours. And they're off. But the thing is, Rodney starts straddling the Bismarck by her 3rd salvo. This both reflects the fact that the Bismarck is reduced in its manoeuvring ability and reduced in its speed, and Rodney has a very good gunnery crew. A very good gunnery crew. And Dalrymple-Hamilton has been training them for this. They've been especially training at long-range shots ever since the Gneisenau scenario, because he never wanted a ship to get away from him again. As I've talked about this before, Royal Navy officers tend to get very obsessed with not repeating the same mistake twice. They get very, very obsessed with not repeating the same mistake twice. And this happens in this time. The thing is, as they start to focus in, I'd say this is probably one of the reasons why the focus of fire is on her, because she seems to be one registering hits. She hit her twice with the 4th. She straddled her with the 3rd salvo and hit her twice with the 4th. This was at 09:02 hours. So if you think about that, she's got off 4 salvos in roughly 18 minutes. Now, again, this is one of the things we talk about. We talk about often the rate of fire of ships. But especially when you're salvoing in on your target, when you're ranging, you're going to wait for the range to hit so you can see where they hit. And especially at long distance fire, you're going to be watching for the fall of shot. So sometimes people talk about, well, the rate of fire of this gun is every 1.5 minutes or twice a minute. And you're going, well, yeah, but the reality is in 18 minutes they fire 4 salvos. So they're firing roughly a salvo every 4.5 minutes. And why? Because they're waiting for the fuller shot. They're waiting for the fuller shot. They're waiting to see where it goes. They're waiting to see what happens. So they can then refine their aim, refine their targeting solution. Because the point is you want to get accurate shots in as quickly as you can. This fourth salvo disables the lower turret knocks out the forward superfiring turret, disables the lower turret, and damages the bridge. And she managed to shower Rodney with splinters. She'd managed to cause shell splinters to go everywhere on Rodney before the forward guns were knocked out, but no. And Rodney was manoeuvring to try and bring X turret to bear as well. Okay? She was exposing herself to the fire from Bismarck's after turrets, but they managed to straddle Rodney without actually hitting her. It's very lucky for Rodney here, but again, one of the things that could be throwing them off is they probably think Rodney's supposed to be doing a certain speed, and you can guarantee Rodney's not doing a certain speed. And also, one of the interesting counts from this battle is that Rodney seems to be maneuvering far more flexibly than she should be. Far more flexibly than she should be. She seems to be, even from the British ships, are quite surprised by how well Rodney is maneuvering. And at this point, you have Rodney, King George V, Norfolk, and Dorsetshire engaging. So please notice the difference here. When fighting Hood, Battle of Denmark Strait, decision to be made to hold off the heavy cruisers so that Hood and Bismarck, Hood and Prince of Wales could engage the two German ships. Tovey comes, and Tovey and Dalrymple-Hamilton also come from the school of thought of, no, everything fires. And Bismarck is literally being engaged by 2 battleships and 2 heavy cruisers. There's no second enemy cruiser here, there's a second enemy ship here, and there's no cruiser, Prince Eugen, backing her up. But they're still engaging with all 4 ships. This is one of the points I make about Denmark Strait, as there is a lot of things in that battle which go against Royal Navy doctrine. They're against the Royal Navy doctrine which was developed in the interwar years. And one of the things that you find in World War II is a constant theme which turns up for me is when the Royal Navy breaks with its doctrine which developed in the 20s and 30s through copious amounts of exercises, through a lot of work, a lot of hard work. The doctrine it develops, when it breaks from that, that's when things go wrong. That's when people get killed. Michael Cooch. It depends. Speed can affect your gunnery, but it's going to depend on A, you're taking into account, which might explain the rate of fire. So you'd have to take longer to take it into account, and it's your rapid movement. Basically, if you want to have the best firing solution, you go at a constant speed at a constant direction. The trouble is that also provides the easiest firing solution for your opponent. So it's always a balance. It's always a balance. And if you're prepared to accept a slower rate of fire to allow your gunnery crews more time to do their aiming, and take into account of these factors, you can get away with it. You can get away with it a bit. And that's what Rodney seems to be doing. Also, the thing is, Safford, you said because Bismarck must pay for what she did to Hood, nothing was held back. Well, that's true, but the point is also that the purpose the Royal Navy was looking for in this scenario, and always been looking for, is you bring the maximum force to bear. You don't hold anything back when sinking your opponent. You bring everything to bear. If they thought they could have got away with it, there would have been destroyers charging in with torpedoes at the same time, and probably another airstrike coming in from Ark Royal. If they didn't think the space was already congested enough, they would have organised it. But the trouble is, if you're firing a torpedo spread, there's always a chance they go wide and hit your own ships, and you don't want to do that in the kind of contested space you're doing, in the kind of melee action, especially as Rodney is closing in quite hard. Now the thing is, good old Tovey signals that Dalrymple-Hamilton can manoeuvre as he must, as he will. And this is one of the reasons why Rodney gets closer to Bismarck, and this is a picture of Rodney engaging Bismarck, than King George V. Because Dalrymple-Hamilton basically decides he's going to close to point-blank range. And every time he's dodging, every time he's turning towards the fall of shots, which is how you tend to throw off, okay? So, if the enemy fires a salve at you, and they miss, if you turn towards that fall of shot, that complicates their decision-making process. You can either turn away from it or turn towards it. Either way, turning is going to complicate their decision-making process because it's going to change the angle and aspect of game, which they're going to have to judge, which means they're having to start their calculations from scratch again. And with the damage that Bismarck has suffered to its bridge, to its conning tower, to its director, to its forward guns, it's already got enough problems building up to it. Dalrymple-Hamilton is just adding to them. And so by turning towards and turning in towards, and every time, whether it's breaking in towards the Bismarck, he's getting closer and closer. And, well, Rodney close to what is pretty much point-blank range. She was firing at full broadsides at flat trajectory. And at roughly 3,000 yards, she also started firing torpedoes. In proof that Dalrymple-Hamilton was a destroyer man to his core, he was closing to torpedo range with his battleship. Okay, please note, this is one of the criteria you have to do. If you are going to put a destroyer man in charge of a battleship, don't give him torpedoes. He spent his entire career, his entire life, getting close to ships to torpedo them. That is what he's going to do. And I love the quote from Ludovic Kennedy. He was aboard HMS Tartar at the time watching a battle. He thinks this is the only instance in history of one battleship torpedoing another in such a battle. It is believed that at least one of these torpedoes struck Bismarck and went boom. But honestly, if they could tell the difference between the 16-inch shells coming in at 3,000 yards point-blank flat trajectory, the 14-inch shells coming in all around them, and the torpedo going boom, and the 8-inch shells going off around them, I would be highly frigging surprised. So I don't expect anyone on the crew to have realised they were hit by a torpedo, but yeah. Yeah, everyone underestimated him on this one. No one would believe the ship was weaker because she was older. If anyone did, they really shouldn't. It's fun. It is fun. Yes, they were the biggest torpedoes in Royal Navy service at the time. The lovely 24-inch torpedo. They not only gave a destroyer man one of the officially slowest battleships in the Royal Navy, with also a very nicely designed hull, which could do higher speeds if pushed, but they also gave him the biggest torpedoes. I'm not sure who's demanding blood in this scenario, but someone is. Someone is. It just gets worse. Rodney is estimated to have fired 378 16-inch shells and 706 6-inch shells. within the time from 08:47 hours to 10:16 hours. So within a little over... Well, she's first spotted at 08:44. So within over the space of an hour and 32 minutes, 92 minutes, she fires 378 16-inch shells and 706 6-inch shells at Bismarck, along with 3 torpedoes. At this point, her guns were firing at such low elevation, they were causing more damage, it was argued, to Rodney than Bismarck's guns had caused to Rodney. Okay? Think about this. The guns are firing at such low elevation, they are causing more damage, more splinter damage, more shock damage to their own ship than the Bismarck's guns caused to Rodney in the battle. This includes the fact that the deck plates had been depressed, the structural members supporting them had cracked and buckled, piping urinals, water mains had broken, and, well, it had also loosened rivets and bolts in the hull plating. Flooding had been induced because of this, and they were down to 8 guns, with 1 gun in A turret being broken down during the battle, and 2 others in B had suffered temporary disability but had been fixed. So yeah, at one point she'd been reduced to 6 guns firing. 2 in A, 1 in B, and 3 in X. And, you know, this is happening. At this point, Dorsetshire is ordered to come in and finish off the Bismarck with torpedoes. And so, after this, she heads home. She's running short of fuel. They're attacked by a pair of Luftwaffe bombers the next day, but she drives in Greenock to replenish ammunition, supplies, fuel on 29th of May, and then departs for Halifax on the 4th of June. This time she's escorting the Windsor Castle, again escorted by 4 destroyers, and then she goes in to be repaired in the Navy Yard, in Boston Navy Yard. And that's when they take their time to do all the jobs they need to do. It's during this refit, having got her to refit, that Hamilton is relieved by Captain James Rivet Carnac, and Hamilton goes off to his other jobs, his next jobs. Now, there is a lovely quote about this, because his son was, of course, aboard King George V in her fire control. His son was aboard King George V firing in this. And there is a great quote which goes around. And this quote, which I really find quite fun, he sends a signal to his son after checking he's alive and talking to him. Basically says, "You're lucky to have seen a show like that after only being in the Navy for 18 months. I've had to wait 35 years. He's had 35 years of anti-submarine warfare, small engagements, and smashing into other ships in his destroyers. Finally, he gets a battle. And to be honest, he handles his battleship like a destroyer. He handles his... driving closer. Getting... No one... There is literally no one in the world, not even the British, with their desire to get closer, which is part of their doctrine with their battleship firepower, plans on getting to 3,000 yards. You don't want to get to 3,000 yards? That's insane. You don't do that. He's driving in close enough to get... Yeah, he's got torpedoes. He's going in for the torpedo kill. There were all sorts of people doing all sorts of things in Rodney during the battle to keep them going. They were cleaning boilers, they were sorting out all sorts of things. That ship was running hot and running red hot to keep everything going. It was an excellent message to receive, but it was also a scenario of, what the frigate happened here? And unsurprisingly, after this, he is appointed to an admiral's post. He is appointed to an admiral's position. He is made Rear Admiral. He's promoted to Rear Admiral in July 1941, and he is made Flag Officer Commanding Iceland. I wouldn't be surprised if the thought of attempting a boarding didn't slip through his mind. I'm sure it did at that range. I'm sure it did. At 3,000 yards, they could have dropped boats. If they hadn't had serious questions about the survivability of Bismarck, I think they would have tried. John Evans, I'm not even sure what these shells were rated for the impact speed of 3,000 yards. At 3,000 yards, I wouldn't be surprised if the shells are shattering on impact because of the speed. I'm not sure if they're even going to do what damage they're going to do at 3,000 yards, because battleships aren't supposed to be engaging at that closer range. That's not in the scenarios. No one does testing for 3,000 yards. Oh, you good boy. I'm fairly sure it's listed on the 16-inch guns, and these things are listed on UAD, and there's a theoretical out there, but no one really plans on engaging at 3,000 yards. Do you want to go to the loo? Is that why you've come up to me? Or do you want something else? Okay, I'll quickly put the poodle in the loo before we get to Flag Officer Iceland. Yeah, he didn't move Iceland that much. He did enjoy Iceland, though. Garden. Okay, look. That must have been the quickest, most pee known to mankind. I literally walk out, and I think you must have run in as I was walking out. Oh, good gracious me. Poodles. And I keep having to stitch your toys back together. Seriously, we're going to have to start a toy fund rather than a treat fund. Zebedee's doing well. He's currently recovering from an operation, so this is our fun. You know, he's had to have some treatment recently, and he's a good dog, but he's had to have some treatment. So, Flag Officer Iceland, Admiral Commanding Iceland. It's a fun post to get. It is a fun post to get. And, well, they're setting it up, and they're setting up a base. They invaded in May 1940. They've established it, and then they start to establish a base and accounting accommodation stores and all these things, and they want to establish an admiral to administer the station. And, well, Dalrymple-Hamilton is the first. As I've said before, he was in training to be the commanding officer of a distant station. If anyone thinks he's trying to do anything funny, he's trying to climb up me to get to his toys. No. No, no, no. Are any of these toys in fit state you can have them to play with? No, but you do realise you've got your toy box over here. You could go to your toy box yourself. You could go to your toy box yourself and get your own toy out instead of harassing me. Would that not be as fun? There you go. You can have your toy. You can have Bunny. Don't squeak it too much. Yes, I love you too. Enjoy. So, Raleigh has been mostly behaved. Yes, he is. Will you stop that? Down you get. Down you go. Now, why has he been put in there? Well, as I said, he's a good officer for a distant command, for a small command, for sorting out issues. And he's also a good officer for working things through. He's out there from September 1941 to August 1942. And basically his main role is to make sure that the Navy doesn't cause trouble to the local Icelandic population, make sure the Navy is supported and sorted there, and generally be helpful. Generally be in charge and sort things out. And he does a good job. The Icelandic people certainly seem to remember him fondly from being out there. He seems to have been very much, I want to make this as minimal impact on you as possible. I want to keep everything as minimal as possible. He's a good commander for it. And then he comes back and, well, he's made the Naval Secretary. Now, for those who don't know, the Naval Secretary to the First Lord, down you go, of the Admiralty, is pretty much the person who is advising the First Sea Lord and the First Lord of the Admiralty on things like promotions. So their role has been restyled as Naval Secretary to the First Lord of the Admiralty in 1912. And pretty much their role is to go in and tell the first Lord of the Admiralty, the senior politician, who would be a good officer to promote as an admiral. Who's going to be good? So you think about this. This is now his second chance to shape the culture of the Royal Navy. To provide the Royal Navy with its culture. Second chance. He's been in charge of Dartmouth for 3 years. He's now in charge of this. Don't. Are you chewing the ears off immediately? You immediately go for the ears. What is it about you and killing the ears of these animals? Should I just get them and snip the ears off? Would that be nicer? Would that be safer? Or would that take out joy for you? Down here again. Oh. No. Now, you're having far too much fun. He's far too active this evening. I think I hadn't taken him for a wander today, but I have. We went for a long one, and then he slept most of the day, but now he's woken up and decided it's party time. Now, with Naval Secretary First Lord Admiralty, again, it's picking who are going to be admirals. This is how he shapes the culture. He's suggesting people for roles. He's suggesting people like Creswell. He's suggesting people like Vian. He's suggesting the people who are going to be promoted. And in a wartime scenario, this is really, really interesting. Because he's really shaping the Navy. Because there are a lot of points that need to be made. Some of them are going to be underage. Some of them are going to be captains who are relatively junior. He is suggesting them. He is putting them forward. No. Stop it. I know I don't get to tell you how you play with your toys, but I think ripping them apart is not a good idea. Before anyone worries again, yeah, as said, Zebedee's had an operation, and Raleigh's basically having to live with me for the moment while Zebedee gets over his operation. So I think he's finding it a little bit stressful, because he isn't spending the time with the family he normally does. So I do apologise if you're finding it a bit distracting. I'm hoping it'll calm down, but he's a bit more under stress, and there isn't really options for putting him elsewhere, because either it's sending him off to his bedroom on his own, which is not fair on him because he likes company, or it's me trying to manage him in here when he's in here the whole time, rather than just when he chooses to be. So, I do apologise. I'm trying to keep him as well behaved as I can, but he is slightly more than normal. Okay? I do admit that. But he's a good boy. Get him a badger to play with. We had the badger up there for him to play with. He's ripped into pieces. I've got a soda. Nicest way I've got, because Zebedee had his operation a little while ago. So not today, but you know. And the thing is, I have literally... Zebedee actually had his operation last week, so it's now starting to wear... It was very... Riley really enjoyed it for the first couple of days, because it was all maximum time with Papa, but now it's becoming a bit, you know... But there is literally a pile of about 9 toys up there that I need to repair, don't I? Yeah, he basically wants constant character. So, Naval Secretary is a good position for him. But it again shows, the thing is, you've got this officer who you want to be giving the culture to developing the culture of your force. And again, it shows how important appointments can be made to this sort of position, because this is an appointment which literally advises on appointments. With that being said, well, they're not going to keep him out of the war for long. He's literally, you could say he's had this sort of role. He has this role for a little over a year and a half. A little under a year and a half, obviously, actually. Yeah, a little under a year and a half. You could say the Iceland role is definitely still an active role, but it's not a seagoing post. And this is not an officer who doesn't want a seagoing post. Yeah, he has come... Yeah, he does... they don't... I will say they are true siblings. They do argue. But they do like each other. They do care for each other. And they're not even allowed to go for their joint wanders at the moment. They can't even do that. They can't even go into the garden at the same time. And various things while Zebedee recovers. Because... yeah, I'll talk more about this in the Q&A session. I'll talk more about the stuff, but you know, yeah, we're having to do them all individually, aren't we? Everything has to be done individually. Now, good boy. You do have a habit of sitting on my right side, and that's the side which controls the mouse. And I'm sorry, I can't reach over the left hand, so you're just going to have to accept it and be patted. Now, he gets Rear and later Vice Admiral commanding 10th Cruiser Squadron. He gets HMS Belfast. And that's a good ship for him to get, isn't it? That's a fun ship for him to get. But there's a small problem. He gets that in March 1944. The Battle of North Cape was December 1943. So as far as he's concerned, it's 4 months too late. If he had got command of Belfast prior, he had got 10th Cruiser Squadron prior to December 1943, he would of course been one of the few officers involved in both the sinking of the Bismarck and the sinking of Scharnhorst. But yeah, he gets the lovely 10th Cruiser Squadron, and he gets them for the last months of the war. And Belfast is a good ship for him. He works a lot with it. It's his first cruiser command. It is his first cruiser command. And there's something nice to that, you know. He has the ship. You can go look around it. You can go look around his flagship. You can see how he treated her, because there are modifications put in her from him. There literally are modifications put in her from him. Now, with her duties in this period, and she does have several duties, she is, of course, the headquarters ship for Bombardment Force E, during the D-Day, and he's in charge of that. He has fun because Churchill tries to invite himself aboard Belfast, and it's only Cunningham, Eisenhower, and the King who managed to prevent Churchill from going aboard it. There was apparently a valiant effort by Hamilton going, please keep that man away from me. Look, there are many, as I said before, again, I quite like Churchill in many ways. But I can also understand why people aren't necessarily always the keenest on him. And there's a great quote from the bombardment when Belfast opens fire, because about 3 minutes into firing, they realise something. She's not only firing her 6-inch guns. Those 4-inch guns she has on her, which are supposedly high-angle AA and air defence, they're also being used. And there was a discussion. Were you meant to be using those as part of the bombardment? And Dalrymple-Hamilton's response was apparently, well, they were there, and me and the captain thought, that's a good thing to use, isn't it? That's helpful. That's going to be fun. In fact, they use her 6-inch and 4-inch guns to suppress the battery at Versailles, because the 4-inch and 6-inch Canberra can keep up such a rate of fire until it's overrun by the Green Howards, 7th Battalion, the Green Howards. And then she supports the Canadian troops as they're moving in from Juno Beach. She returns to Portsmouth on the 16th of June to replenish her ammunition. She is quite literally down to the dregs of 4-inch ammunition out of 6-inch ammunition, and there is a discussion as to whether or not she's shot through her barrels as well as her ammunition. The decision is she hasn't. She can go out. She goes out again, returns on the 18th of June to carry on supporting, and some Schnell boats decide to try and attack her, but she weighs anchor and moves through a smoke screen, firing her guns, and she fires her last rounds in the European waters on the 8th of July, 1944. And then he gets to go to the Far East with her. That's always a fun thing. 10th Cruiser Squadron gets to do some very interesting work at this point in World War II. And Dalrymple-Hamilton, as said, has fun with all this. He is working very, very hard and is putting his force together. He is proving an excellent cruiser commander because he's basically aggressively pushing his cruisers wherever they can go. As Falcano puts it, nobody said he couldn't, so he did. What are you... Don't eat cuddly toy. Okay, is there a toy which he cannot eat? Is there a toy here which he cannot eat? Why he can't get his own toys out, I do not know. There you go. Have a ball. It's one of the balls which I actually have about 3 of. Yes, I know, it's not as fun to kill this as a furry toy, but guess what? This survives! And most importantly, it doesn't squeak. Enjoy. I know it's not furry, but okay, if you don't want it, I'll play with it. I will play with it. I will happily play with it, you know. It's lovely to play with. Look at all this. It bounces up and down. It really does. It's like entertaining a small child, aren't you? You are. There you go. There you go. Go play with the toy. Squeaky Kong chew toy? No. You mean he can't eat the ball? He cannot eat this ball. It's the Chuck It by Ultra XL. They are tough as anything. Enjoy. And I'll be nice and give you a biscuit to start you off on it. So that's your compensation for having a chew toy taken away. So, and after this, well, he goes in April 1945 to become Admiral Superintendent of the Malta Dockyard. He goes and has fun there. I know he doesn't get to go to the Far East, but he's trained up the squadron for the Far East. I think I just said took him to the Far East, and sorry, read my notes wrong and mildly distracted by the death of the bunny. Trying to stop him eating stuff because I'd really rather him not have to have an operation. I'd love to say it'd be the first time, but you haven't had an operation before. But my golly, have you had chalk tablets before? Because you try and eat everything in sight. You're a poodle, aren't you? Yes, you're cute. You're wagging your tail and trying to hide. Oh, you're cute. Yes, you're cute. Yeah. Nope. Down you go. No. I will get you... No, you will not get a food toy. I remember what you had the last time you had one of those. No, he can't eat a ball. So, Admiral Superintendent, Malta Dockyard. And again, in this one, he's having fun. He's keeping the fleet going. If you think about it, between April 1945 and May 1946... they are basically being used to try and refresh ships on their way to the Far East. They're being used to recondition ships which are in European waters. They're being used to ships which are still in Malta to assess them and decide whether they can refloat them and fix them or whether they are complete write-offs. He's doing all these duties and more. And he gets very actively involved. As you wouldn't be surprised with him. As you would not be really surprised. Again, though, it kind of tells you where he's going, because... how do I put this? Admiral Superintendent of Malta Dockyard, that's very rarely a shining post to the Sea Lords, isn't it? It's not going to be handling UK politicians... It's going to be handling Maltese ones, but they're not quite the same problem, realistically. They can cause issues, but they don't control purse strings. And from there, he goes to Flag Officer commanding Scotland Northern Ireland. And he's one of the key people in defending and maintaining the Clyde base before it gets expanded for the nuclear submarine operations. He is promoted to full admiral in January 1948 and retires in October 1950. After having served as flag officer commanding Scotland Northern Ireland for a little over 2 years. Oh, Jonathan Moon. I might have to look into that. So that's how his career ends. That's happens. And he retires and he goes on to have, you know, various fun things. He was an admiral at the British Joint Services Mission in Washington, D.C. as well from 1948. And as I said, retires in 1950. But that's one of those roles which you sort of go through and you think, what's he really doing out there? Well, he's basically got the right amount of luster to go and talk to the Americans. That's the thing. When they're going, yes, we fought this big battle. Well, yeah. I took part in D-Day and I sunk the Bismarck. And I was the guy who drove my battleship 3,000 yards off the Bismarck. You will have to go to bed. You will have to go to bed. Okay, that's it then. I'm sorry, boy. I'm sorry, but this is not. This is. No. I'm still live and he keeps disrupting things. Self-worth. Sorry about that. Literally, as I was going down, and we're now going to go into the question session, as I was wandering down, the gate broke, and I had to fix the gate. Take care, KVG. Call you was protesting because the poodle was going to bed. Now, as I promised Runon, I'm going to try and activate the good old Streambot. And we'll see what happens if that works. Zebedee wasn't happy about many things at that point. As normal, I will be on Discord later as well. Will be on Discord later. So let's see if I can get all that. Oh, good lord. There's now a lot of naval history questions are closed. Going through. I'm not sure why they're going through on YouTube, but they are. That's a huge things. But it's now working with YouTube. We can say that it's working with YouTube. But I think I will turn it off. Yeah, I think I think we're gonna have some more fun with that. I'll probably do some more testing of it over the weekend. We'll see. Before Sunday. Maybe get some testing in tomorrow evening. Oh, that was massive. That's not supposed to happen. That is not supposed to happen. Just a few kinks to sort out. Don't know why it's suddenly ironic. But anyway, questions time. Any questions you want to ask? Any stuff you want to discuss? And again, with the poodle, to explain what's happened is Zebedee, to explain why the poodle's quite so stressed, and probably Zebedee's, acting up a bit more than he's wrong. A few days ago, well, let's see. About a week or so ago, on my birthday, we had to take Zebedee in for a surgery because he's found to have an enlarged prostate, not cancer. But that and a range of issues were causing him to have issues with his testosterone level, which is one of the reasons why, along with his bad eyesight, he occasionally reacted, let's say, poorly. He wasn't always himself, and he seemed to have these weird phases he'd go through. And so he's had to have something inserted to regulate his hormones. And he's also had to have some other surgery done to fix the areas which were causing issues for him. Longer term, he may have to have another operation. But if it's found that the fixes have worked and he doesn't need to have further hormone regulation, he won't have that. But basically, that's why currently the doggies are being kept apart while we fix them. It's fun times, basically. So yeah, that was what happened on my birthday. I took the dog to the vets, and the dog had surgery, and it was found all sorts of issues which had to be fixed. So it's one of those things where people go, so what is it causing it? And you go, it's actually a very long name which I can't really pronounce, so I'm not going to try to. But it's not cancer. It's not like that. But it is. It's a very rare condition and usually acts as a reaction to chemicals in their background, but you can't find any chemicals in his bloodstream. Your question is up above. I will track it down, Black Horse. I will track it down. So that's why you will see the poodle is basically living in here. And as fun as I try and make it to be, and as much as I try and take him on walks, he does seem to have a habit of sometimes, if I've taken him on the walk too early in the morning, because it's easier for me today to take him early in the morning, then by the time it gets to this time, he wakes up and goes, oh, I'm now fresh and I'm going to party. And I almost need to either structure it so that I have a walk in the morning and then play with him in the garden beforehand or something. But usually I do the playing in the garden a bit before I do the walk, because I basically tire him out a bit before I take him on the walk. So he's less excitable on the walk, because the thing is, the poodle, when he wants to, he likes to give people hugs, and it's easier when he's a bit more tired. You're unable to replicate the failure mode. Wonder what the frigate's happening. My hardware-software combination. We'll see. His son got to captain, and which was fairly decent. Descendants in the Royal Navy today. His son was the executive officer of Britannia as well. So that tells you how experience. He got to captain, and he had 2 children, 2 boys, and well, his son became Vice Lord Lieutenant of Ayrshire and Arran, so I'm not sure. There were also army officers in the family. it's one of those things of they have a lot of connections. They do have a lot of connections, and they work in a lot of these places. So, you know, that's what they get up to. So yeah, that's the fun we had. They had. They did quite an interesting family, really, as a whole. They did a lot of work, a lot of good work. Yeah, question's not close. It's feeding. It's not feeding off itself. Well, that's good. Black Horse's question is up above. I'm scrolling up to where Black Horse's question might be. I will track down Black Horse's question. If someone else sees it before me, please just beep it down below and I'll find it. How much disaster would have been a Royal Navy being able to capture and bring into port Bismarck? Oh, if the Royal Navy had captured Bismarck and brought it in, that would have been a nightmare for them. That would have been a nightmare for Nazi Germany, because that would have been an absolute PR nightmare. And it would probably have been maxed out by the Royal Navy. There is no scenario where the Royal Navy does not max that out absolutely completely. They would spread that everywhere. What's the problem?
Crosshead screwdriver.
Why are you looking for a crosshead screwdriver?
Found the screw.
Oh, well, if you found a screw, that's not a crosshead. That's a crosshead.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. Sister's attempting her own engineering. You have 2 degrees in engineering, I know. That's why I do all the manual labour and work in this house. Very sensible division of labour. Oh. I also think you brought a daddy longlegs in here with you. Sisters. They leave their aerial insects behind. Ah, frigate. Missed it. I think I got it. Maybe got it, maybe didn't. I don't know. Daddy longlegs. Right then. Right then. So, hopefully, we can see if Powder Monkey works now. How's that sound? Don't bring in... Oh, why is it every time you come in here you bring in daddy longlegs in with you? What is it? Are you attracting them?
I've got no idea. The only thing I am attracting.
Sisters, I don't know. Staff Johnson, was the need of speed influenced by Turbino racing through the fleet at the review? I don't think so. He's a little late for that. He's more of a case of he's just got a need for speed. That's just him. That's just what he loves. Shira, Bismarck bombarding the beaches in support of D-Day. Just for propaganda footage? I doubt they'd have reconstructed it at that level. At the point at which they're 3,000 yards away, she would need a massive reconstruction. And I would talk about a massive reconstruction. She would probably have to be reconstructed in American yards, because the sheer level of reconstruction you need. She might have been available for D-Day, but would they want to use her? What would they reconstruct her with? Would they put? I doubt they put in German 15-inch guns. Maybe they put in British 15-inch. Maybe they'd rebuild a British 15-inch, because that might be easier to install. But honestly, you're installing everything from scratch, so you might as well put twin 16s. And you could probably do it, because let's be honest, the American systems take up less space than the German ones do. So you could probably get twin American 16s into the twin 15-inch turrets. Twin 16-inch turrets that would fit into the twin 15s barbettes. But you'd have to. She's a complete reconstruction job. She is a complete reconstruction job. Karen, it's called a Phillips. Look, Stafford, I've got her to call it a crosshead, okay? Please don't confuse matters. It took me years to get her to call it a crosshead. That's more acceptable than what she was originally calling it. Please don't go there, okay? Don't go there. I was like, try and explain to her degrees in engineering are civil engineering, not construction. Well, they are construction, but the construction of whole houses, not small finite issues. Just leave them to me, please. But she found the screw, she's rebuilt the gate. I'll go fix it later. I'll go check it works, okay. Son of a sloop. I like that one, Hayes Gray. I will remember that one. What was she calling it? I gots to know. The T-head. Okay. She called it the T-head. Not wrong, but not right either. Not wrong, but not right. The thing is, scrapping her for some material probably makes more sense, but probably preserving her as a war trophy is what they do. But again, if you're going to rebuild her, it's going to be a massive reconstruction, and it's going to be a colossal. Prize money for Bismarck? Oh, good lord. In the nicest way, the Dalrymple-Hamiltons would be some of the richest people in Britain to this day. It's a Daddy Longlegs has wings and is flying, so basically she doesn't realize it flew in the door with her. I have no idea where it is, but I'm presuming it's off in that section. I have got, because there's farmland all around us. We are definitely in the country. You get insects coming in, it's perfectly natural. So I make sure I have the very specific types of lights and grates which actually kill insects when they buzz up to them and they go zzz, they get zapped. They're useful. But mainly they seem to come in when my sister insists on leaving doors open in the evening and lights on, and so they come flying in, which is unsurprising because that's what insects do. Let's see, what's the next question? I think I've answered that on about the engineering. They'd have to rework her. Runon, would he have worked red into the Dazzle camo ships if he knew that red would make him go faster? If he truly believed in the power of orc engineering, my god, that man would have made it go red. She would have been bright red on every single surface he could. Sima, if Rodney and her three troubles had solo Bismarck and Knight, would she have been on top of the list of becoming a museum ship, or off topic? That's honestly an interesting question. If she'd soloed Bismarck, at a certain point, if she'd soloed Bismarck, especially if the scenario had been that Hood gets sunk, and then Rodney, the Avenging Angel, solos Bismarck at like 16 o'clock in the afternoon, 1600 hours, almost the next day. There's a very compelling case to keep her and to make her into a museum ship. Would she? That's going to depend on the government post-war. And honestly, the governments post-war don't keep anything. But it becomes a very interesting narrative. It becomes a very interesting narrative, so they might keep her. Because of the narrative going to be of her soloing Bismarck. Mark, I will say that as long as she's in Britain, Goring is ordered to use everything to obliterate the shame. More than likely, but the thing is, as said, if you're going to repair her, she's going to have to go to the States. That's the only place where they're going to have the space, the yard space, and also the distance from Goring to be able to repair her. Was there a destroyer mentality of capturing ships instead of sinking them? We don't tend to talk about that, but certainly during World War II, the destroyers and cruisers do like to capture ships. In fact, the Royal Navy as a whole likes to capture ships, especially merchant ships. They've got a lot of training, a lot of pre-war doctrine around capturing ships, so it's not so much a mentality. It's something which they are still included in. So Thompson. What ship would Hamilton have taken at the end of the war, post-war, if given the choice? How long would he have held on to it, and would he have gotten his son aboard to train? If he'd had his way, he'd have probably got a new destroyer. Honestly, I can imagine him getting hold. If he could have got hold of a daring class at that point, or a battle class, he'd probably be happy with them. But yeah, maybe Vanguard. She's about fast enough for him. But realistically, by the point you get to the end of war, you now need admirals who are going to build the navy of peacetime. He has shaped the culture. He has shaped the junior officers. He's shaped the senior officers. His role's now winding down, sort of thing. Yeah, well, you have to remember, the Brook at this point. HMS Rodney was on her way to America to be refit. Possibly they would send her to Halifax or something like that to refit her in Halifax, with American support. But if you consider Rodney's on her way to America to be refitted in the Navy Yard, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, there is, as I often say, there is a level of neutrality. Yes, there is what you always have to remember, Roosevelt is out for what he thinks is the best interests of America. And there are all the discussions and times when, frankly, he is not that great to Britain in terms of his relations, especially with the Soviet Union, and what he's prepared to give Stalin, and how he sometimes treats Churchill with Stalin, etc. But that's not unusual. That's not without precedent. But saying that, at the same side, there is a British battleships being repaired in the Navy Yard. Again, the same could happen with Dalrymple, with Bismarck. Hello, Maddie. Hey, that sounds more like a Mozzie Hawk. In the US, I think they are. In the UK, they tend to be the flying ones that look like almost flying spiders. The fact that Shibra and Runon are having fun with the red paint scenario, yes, it does make it does. It's usually a color of anti-fouling paint, but not necessarily the color. I'm not sure if I don't think it did technically have a large enough dock to fit Bismarck, but again, in a nicest way, it's probably where you can take it to and then work from there and work things out with the Americans. But I wouldn't be surprised the Americans would be happy to refit it. You might have heard that back then. I think Halifax had slightly better facilities than they do today. But I was thinking the Germans would consider having their ships taken to a neutral port of Casus Belli. They might do. They might, but it technically isn't their ship at that point. That's the argument. When it's been captured and is now flying a British flag, it's a British ship. So whilst they can make a case, the technicality is it is not an American. It is not a German ship at that point. The moment it is flying a British flag, it is a British ship. And that's the problem. And we're not doing a poll on HMS Bismarck. I have no doubt that's what she would be called, because after all we have HMS President and various other things in our history, but yeah. Sure, fixing a war prize in your own country. Yes, it is. It is a good excuse for expanding the dock and expanding facilities. And again, there is the other option. I just don't think you bring it to Britain to fix it, because, again, it's going to require too much work, it's going to take up too much yard space for that time, and the Germans are going to try and bomb the bejesus out of it. There is that advantage, though. You will basically turn whichever dock you stick it in, and if you stick it in a dock high enough up in Scotland, the Germans are going to kill themselves, keep trying to get their bombers up there, and they're going to wreck their bomber fleet. And it's going to mean they're not going to bother about London. Have the patron votes been decided? I think probably have. Bismarck. I wouldn't argue Bismarck's the beginning of the end. Basically, Bismarck shows you a classic example of why you don't send out these ships solo. Bismarck is being sent out as a surface raider, and it suffers from the same weakness of all surface raiders. The moment it's damaged, it's got a glass jaw. That's the problem for all surface raiders. It's just... Sometimes it's going, no, it's not. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't this. You think, of course it's damaged. You think they'd allow themselves to be hunted down and killed that way if they weren't damaged? You think they would allow that to happen? No, because that's the whole point. Bismarck was a battleship. Bismarck was a battleship. The Royal Navy probably wouldn't always have a HMS Bismarck if she was captured, literally because of the scenario of the fact the shrinking fleet post World War II. But there is the other scenario. They get her, they fix her up enough that she can be put on display, and then they bring her in display, and then she survives the museum ship. There is that scenario. Bismarck survives to this day as a museum ship in the UK, if she's captured. But yeah, you know, if you send a ship out solo, this is probably the point at which they sort of, you know, really realise the point of, if you cannot support something, you shouldn't do it. The thing is, though, Bismarck ties up a lot of British resources. And most of the German heavy ships, that's what they do. They tie up a lot of British resources. Because the British have to be prepared for them to wander out, because they can cause so much damage if they do get into the convoys. And so this is why I talk about the Soviet development of a strategic raiding doctrine for their cruisers, especially the Slavov's class, and for their fleet. And one of the reasons why people often ask me, why did the Soviets maintain a force in the Indian Ocean? Why did they maintain force in East Point? They have no relation to NATO, to the conflict in the Cold War. And you go, well, it's basically to draw off NATO forces. Because they can cause so much trouble that you either have to send forces to engage them, or you have to accept losses. And if you accept losses, you could be sort of accepting the loss of a theatre, the loss of the ability to get stuff through that theatre. And that's the problem. It's an issue. Black Horse, is it how much damage that's the issue? Yes and no. Any damage really is bad for a ship. Let's be honest, one of the things you might not think about is if its ability to generate fresh water is damaged, that can seriously affect its operations. That was the Graf Spey's issue. And a few other things. And it's like people go, oh, are there big holes? Well, that's only a small problem. No, what has the other damage done? What has the shock damage done? What has the cumulative damage done on the ship? If they had her in a dock, we know what all the V2 rockets would be aimed at. If they could get the V2 rockets that far. Remember, the big problem for the Germans, especially when they were aiming the V2 rockets and things, was there was actually, by the time they had the V2 rockets and V1 rockets in service, there is a limit to how far those things can be fired, and as they lose launching positions, they're being pushed further and further back. The classic thing of the V2s is they're defeated more by the advance of the ground forces than anything else, because whilst you can wingtip and flip a V1 with a fighter, with a V2 you can't do that. It's doing a ballistic arc in, and it's more dangerous than somewhere else because of that. But the issue for that V2 weapon, the issue for it is that it can only go so far, and if you can push back the launch positions, it ain't launching at you. I don't think that would be the response of the Americans, though. If you can pay for the work and get the crew over here, then we'll talk Germany. Because, as I said, again, the laws of ownership are very simple. The Germans have lost ownership. If it's been captured or British, it's no longer the German property. That'd be the Germans basically going, America, return us the property we lost. You lost it in battle. You lost it fair and square. In the old timeline where Bismarck runs into Rodney and the tribals Rodney and the tribals and gets sunk, does the Royal Navy hunting force shift to hunting down Prince Jürgen? They would certainly try and get her. But again, as the thing is, Royal Navy doctrine in that kind of battle would be, again, firing at range, engaging, but the destroyers trying to dash close. The destroyers would be doing their best to cause trouble for Bismarck, making sure it couldn't focus its secondaries in, making sure it couldn't aim its guns properly, and would have deterring. But they're trying to focus in and launch their torpedoes. They would probably split up into, I think they would maybe go line ahead, but they might go into a line abreast counter turn. So that's when they do the phrase in that thing is when they do a line abreast, and the whole point is they can swerve, fire their torpedoes, and then carry on in behind their torpedoes, making it more difficult for the German ship to avoid them. But you do ideally want to get down to 3,000-4,000 yards, if you can, to launch torpedoes to make it as close a range as possible. But they would be doing their hardest to get close. I thought Black Horse. I thought that topic was in the April one. We'll see. Ah, yes. Oh, Black Horse. That's that one you suggested yourself in a YouTube video. Yeah, that one's going in. That one's gone in, but it's not shown up yet. But that's, if we skip through here to here, that's going to show up in the September-October specials. I've put that into the September-October specials. So that's not going to a vote then. That's on the list of September-October specials. It just hasn't shown up yet. Because it's in the ones which are coming next week when we have the results from the May ones. So, a ground attack aircraft can look for the preparations of a V2 before launch, but it was a short time window. Yeah, it was, and they did try. They were trying everything they could to send them, but basically it's always the thing with missiles. The thing is the same thing with aircraft as the SAS would tell you in World War II in North Africa. If you can take them down before they launch, that's their weakest. When they're on the ground is when they're at their weakest. On the ground is when they're at their weakest. It's always the way. It's when they're on the ground. They're at their weakest. General Staff question did much better this time around. It did. It did. I think all the questions have done quite well this time. I tend to watch. I tend to watch the alternate histories. Technically, they're supposed to be Patreon ones, but let's put it this way: some of you do so much interaction on the chat that, especially when I've got something like the September-October specials, when we're supposed to be going away to Japan. So basically, those months are going to be very heavily specials, and the only lives I'm going to try and guarantee are going to be the Sunday ones, which will be at whatever time we are in Japan. They'll be done in the evening in Japan time, Sunday Japan time. So I have no idea what time it'll work out to as UK or America time at that point. It's probably going to be like when we were in Australia and I did some lives, etc. It's going to be at random times. So basically, I'm planning on there being on Tuesday, Wednesday, hopefully on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, there are going to be premieres. And the thing is, they're going to be all recorded before we go away, so it'll be nice and special. They'll be nice and good, but you know that they are. It means I have to have them listed up, and I've started recording them already. It's like I might have recorded 2 of them already, and I might be recording them now, so they try and get them all done, so they're all done for when we go away. You know, so it's all done well in advance. Anyway, I'm now going to go 9 hours ahead. Oh, that'll be fun. So basically, if I'm doing 7 o'clock in the evening, it's going to be not 8 a.m. UK time. Lunchtime for some of you. It's going to be fun. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I am considering asking if it all comes to plan and all like I'm hoping it's going to be. I am considering asking if we can do one from a proper Japanese bath, and so you'll have the shipshape crew all enjoying our lovely onsen and talking to you on live. Considering my colleagues, I might have to make that an adult-rated video. Not sure if YouTube will like that. I'm not sure if YouTube accepts adult-rated content. It might be only a Twitch-only stream. Yeah, it's roughly an hour for each 15 degrees of longitude. But yeah, it's fun. And I think... I don't know if Japan is in all the same time zone. Because I think we're fairly covering it. I've got to work out some exact details of all these things. It's going to sound strange, but this is the stuff. I haven't worked that one out yet because I've been working out the museums, I've been working out the dates, and I've been working out the connections. So the other stuff is stuff which I am working out now as we go. Hello, Benno. Now, with that being said, hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all found this interesting. I think we have an interesting video for next week's live, which actually was probably better if I went this way to round to Gishirt. Next week's live is, if I'm not mistaken, Leslie's Pearl Harbor battle line sails on December the 6th. Oh, 10 a.m. Oh, well, yeah. Okay, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But yeah, Pearl Harbor is next week's, next Thursday's one. And next Tuesday's one is the Admiral James... well, isn't going to be Admiral James. He's going to be on Wednesday. Next Tuesday is going to be the one, the only SDSR 2025 by Naval Historian. And that's the Battle of Zonshio on the 8th. Battle at Sea. Well, honestly, this is going to be an interesting one to talk through because it's what are the reasons for them going to sea if they go to sea on the 6th? What happens? Are they sailing south? Are they sailing west? Because if you think about it, if they're sailing anything but north or east, they're sailing away from the carriers. So if they're sailing anything but north and east, then the battle doesn't happen. But the thing is, you still probably have the attack. You probably have the attack on Pearl Harbor, but they don't fight anything there, which means you have the battleships free to do other things. Mark Harkness. I am wondering where what that's in response to, because when I say such a response, no, it's not the official legal response. It's an admissive duty impossible first type response. I'm trying to see what the question, that's a response to. But it's an interesting one. It's an interesting starting point to think for, because you suddenly end up with a lot more battleships available earlier in the war, and whilst, yes, the Americans don't suddenly have a lot more fuel supplies, and don't suddenly have a lot more access in terms of that, they do have, in terms of oilers, they have the fuel, they just don't have the oilers. Those ships are going to present an interesting thing for some of the battles, if they are available, for things like Guadalcanal, etc. Because suddenly you can have a far stronger battle fleet standing off positions if you want to. And the Americans probably will want to. It's going to provide them with utility. And those battleships could be very, very damaging. The weekdays will probably be they'll be Sundays. The live will be Sundays. They will be Sundays in nicest way while in Japan. As said, I'm gonna leave premieres for the rest of the week, but it's gonna be Sundays if I'm doing a live. That's my point. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Take care. I will be on Discord in a few minutes. Hope tonight's video was okay, and have fun. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Jonathan Moon, Mark Harkness, nice to go everyone, Runon, everyone for chatting away, Paul Amos, and all the rest of you. Black Horse, Medi, 20 Chocks a Day, Thomas Gikwa. Thank you, Benno. Thank you, Steve Clarke. Thank you, Januska. Thank you, everyone who's been watching. Poseidon, Dave Harrison. I think I said Stafford, but if I haven't, Stafford. DeBrock. Hayes Gray, Sibra, Melanie, Leslie, all of you, everyone who's been here, thank you. John Shea, everyone, I hope you had a nice time. Michael Cooch, I hope you all had a lovely time. Timu Locker, hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you. Sorry again for the bit of a late start, but as I said, the shopping had just arrived. Thank you, everyone. Take care. And see you on Sunday. Oh, and before I go, remember, Sunday is the 5th anniversary of the channel. So hopefully everything will be working today. Hopefully all the bad juju of things going wrong left us today. And hopefully everything works perfectly on Sunday and we get to do a 5th anniversary, which is as cool as it can be. Take care, everyone. Have fun and thank you.